Test, test.
We can hear you, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors on January 21st, 2025. We're going to start with an invocation by Pastor Ken, and if you would remain standing, Supervisor Gould is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for all that you give us. Help us, lead us in our stewardship of the budget and land use. Help us care for the environment, support our community, health, and well-being. Guide the people who work in law enforcement, judges, supervisors, and all who work in Mojave County. We ask for your continued blessings upon us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Board of Supervisors may by motion recess into executive session to receive legal advice from the board's attorneys on any item contained in this agenda pursuant to ARS 38-431.03 A3, 4, and 7. I'm looking for a motion for executive session to be held on February 3rd, 2025 at 9 a.m. for discussion and consultation with legal counsel in accordance with ARS 38-431.03 A3, 4, and 9 to discuss items noticed in this agenda with an asterisk.
So moved.
For that motion, second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Official business to come before the board. Discussion of pending or contemplated litigation claims and demands. Attorney Esplin.
Good morning. We have nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee and or legislative reports. Supervisor Lettman. Supervisor Gould.
Nothing today, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Borelli.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just going to report my two other colleagues. We went to the County Supervisors Association new supervisor orientation, and I will be attending the next meeting with CSA this month.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Martin. Thank you. And I have nothing to report. Manager Elters, do we have a lobbyist report today?
Mr. Chairman, he's trying to connect. He's waiting in the lobby. I just want to see if Flora can admit him, or if IT can admit him into the meeting. Maybe we can go on.
We'll come back to him. Let's go to your county manager's report.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. I do not have a county manager report today.
Okay. Well, that takes care of that then. Is he on? Is he on now? Okay, well then we're going to go to our consent agenda. Supervisor Martin, are there any items you'd like to remove from consent today?
Yes, I had several. Item 38. Item 36. The other one concerned the procurement of a boat for $546,000 or something.
$22?
Yes,
Okay,
that's it.
thank you. Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine is an extensive list. 13, 15, 17, 18, 20, 21, 24, 23, scratch 23, 32, 33, 34, 37, and 39.
Thank you, Supervisor Letman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull item 19.
Supervisor Borelli.
No, I think we got a lot of them already.
And I have none to pull either, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda, minus items 13, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 32, 33, 34, 36, 37, 38, and 39.
So moved.
Second.
For that motion, second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item number 13.
Oh,
Supervisor.
Chairman Leonfelter.
Yes.
Nick Ponder is online now.
Okay, let's hear his report briefly, and then we'll continue. Mr. Ponder, are you with us? Mr. Ponder, are you with us?
He's on mute.
You
He'll need to unmute himself.
have to unmute yourself if you can hear us.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm at the Capitol, so I apologize for the delay here. So just a brief update. Last week, obviously, was the first week of session that coincided with Thursday being the last day for House members to drop bills before they reached what's called their 7-bill limit. So after 5 p.m. Thursday, they can only drop 7 additional bills each member. So we reached that limit Thursday at 5 p.m. We'll continue to keep an eye out for those. The senators do not have a limit on bills that they can drop after any particular deadline. We continue to keep an eye out on water legislation. I have not seen anything of note as of this point in time. There's a lot of legislation with respect to subsequent management areas, subsequent irrigation on expansion areas, etc. There's nothing hugely of note. I will point out that Ms. Griffin does have a couple of bills that will allow for the repeal of irrigation non-expansion areas. So we need to keep an eye on that for the Hualapai Valley Basin. and we'll continue to track that legislation. I have not seen anything yet related to what's called basin management area legislation. You may recall from last year that was Senator Kerr bill, Senate Bill 1221. As it winded down to the end of legislative session, it ended up only being a bill that protected 3 basins, one of which being the Hualapai Valley Basin. Our concern with that bill at the end of last session was that it only allowed for a maximum of 15% conservation in the Hualapai, and it did not allow for protection of any other basins. And so we had concerns with the proliferation of groundwater pumping potentially going to the Sacramento or the detrital basins, and not allowing any protections in those basins going forward. And so we opposed that at the very end. I have not seen any basin management area legislation come forward yet. I do expect it to come forward. I also expect Democrats to drop a more progressive version of legislation. I don't expect the governor's office, at least at this point, to be supportive of anything, at least outwardly, vocally. And then the governor, in her State of the State speech, did indicate a sort of forceful willingness to allow the Department of Water Resources to advance more active management areas. As we discussed last time, they did create an active management area in the Wilcox Basin. You'll recall that the AMA statutes from 1980 allow the department to do that. Wilcox was the first one that DWR created. Gila Bend is sort of on notice, which is to the southwest here of the Phoenix AMA, is sort of on notice as the next one in line, with Renegris Plain, which is in La Paz County, being potentially third in line for new active management areas. And the governor, in her State of State, effectively highlighted that. So that's my update. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Ponder. Any questions from the supervisors? Okay, thank you again. Have a good day. We're going to go back to item number 13, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious whether we're getting the access rate from the Kingman Hospital under this agreement or not.
Director Acton coming down.
Good morning, Chairman. Supervisor Gould, I honestly don't know if we're getting an access rate on this one. We are billed these rates. Both item 13 and item 15 have been treated as, each time we do it, it's a small expense. And so these are things that happen kind of routinely for the Sheriff's Office Detention Center. And essentially what we were doing is we realized that our aggregate spend exceeds my authority every year. We wanted to be fully transparent with the board and say, it's really not within our control. If something happens and they need emergency medical care, we are required to provide that service. And so this is just us clarifying that we know that we make those expenses. I can check with the Sheriff's Office and follow up with you if there's any chance we're getting any kind of specialized rate based on insurance.
Thank you for that. And I believe we negotiated the access rate for hospitalization at one point. So if you could check into that.
I was going to say, I don't want to speak out of turn. I know that we have some other things that we've got, like an IGA with the state hospital, things like that. I don't know if it applies to these emergency services. Essentially, we could have continued to operate as we have. It's considered a one-time or like a special event. It's not a known expense. Sure. We don't know that somebody's going to need emergency medical care, but it is something that happens, and we wanted to be fully transparent on where those expenses go. One of the benefits of doing this is, generally speaking, these are paid by claim. And so there's multiple expenses that are out there. This will actually get all expenses related to both 13 and 15. 13 is to KRMC, 15 is for the actual transportation. It will get it on one purchase order so that we can aggregate it in one spot and have all that back up in one area.
Thank you, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, if I could jump in, I think.
Yes, one.
Thank you. Supervisor Gould, you may be referring to item 33. Is that's the one where we have the IGA with the state for access rates for if they hospitalize inmates for more than 24 hours. I don't know if that's the one you're referring to.
Yeah, but I had the question on this one also.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Any other discussion, or I'd entertain a motion?
Motion to approve.
You heard that motion in second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Appear to have it. You have it, so ordered. Item number 15, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Same issue. I was just curious whether we're getting the access rate on this or not, and Tara's going to look into that for us. Thank you, Chairman. I motion to approve.
Heard that motion in second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? I appear to have it. Do have it, so ordered. Item number 17, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious where these bathrooms are to be built. In the backup, I didn't see anything about the location of these proposed bathrooms.
Good morning again, Chairman Supervisor Gould. This is the ARPA project for the bathrooms in Chloride. Oh, I hope I'm not getting this wrong. The design itself was for 3 different possible projects, community parks, restrooms, and we awarded 2 of those using ARPA funding. And so I believe it is Chloride. I don't want to speak out of turn. I believe it was Chloride and Topak. But I know one of them we did not have enough funds. So essentially this item, the board had already approved the award of this contract for those design services. The ADEQ permitting was going to be Mojave County's responsibility as defined in the contract, but the contractor, to move things along, just paid ADEQ, and when they came to us and wanted to get reimbursed, it wasn't contemplated in their contract. So this amendment is just clarifying that. And we have to do a transfer from the parks contingency funds because, as you guys are aware, when we were wrapping up all of the ARPA items, we swept any unspent funds. This was a pending amendment that hadn't been approved and hadn't been accounted for. So parks funds will need to transfer the money to cover these expenses.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman,
Manager Althers.
just clarification. I think Tara said Chloride and Topak. It would not be Topak. It would be Dolan Springs and Chloride. Just clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion?
Motion to approve.
You've heard that motion in second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I just appear to have it. Do have it, so ordered. Item number 18, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious, the increase in cost to clean the new sheriff's substation in Lake Havasu is about 267% more than to clean the existing substation. And that just seemed like, I don't know if the new location is 267% larger than the existing, or are they putting some cost increase from the cleaning of the Lake Havasu County building and pushing it off onto the sheriff's substation?
So Chairman Linkfelter, Supervisor Gould, I know that the Lake Havasu substation, the new location, is much larger than the old one. I don't know if it's 267 square feet or 267% larger, but it may be. It's quite a bit larger than that particular facility. I know that, wow, I almost said chairman. I almost gave you a promotion. Director Latosky could probably speak to the actual square footage of the 2 buildings by comparison. But one of the reasons for this upgrade to that location was that the Lake Havasu, the prior substation, was very small.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other discussion?
Director Latosky.
Director Latosky, can you come up and...
Morning, Chairman Lienfelter, Supervisor Gould, members of the board. As Tara alluded to, the new Lake Havasu City substation is significantly larger. It's upwards of about 12,000 square feet as compared to approximately 2,000 to 2,500 square feet in the former building. Many more new restrooms as well in that new facility. So that explains the
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
That motion.
Second.
For that motion, second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I just appear to have it. Do have it, so ordered. Item number 19, Supervisor Lettman.
I'm pulling this for informational purposes only, a little bit of training here. I was hoping Treasurer Mello could come up and just re-explain how this process works and what liability, if any, there is to the county?
Good morning, Chairman and Supervisors. So this is just standard procedure. Wells Fargo does require us to renew these lines of credit every year. We do it. It's costs us nothing, and they're rarely used. Only we have 2 districts out of 10 that have used them in the past 3 years, and we draw exactly what is required. And we only generally use them when we have to use them. It's through June through September until the tax bills go out and that money starts coming in. And like I said, no cost to us. They're at zero balance now. It's just standard procedure.
Okay, so to recap then, to the guarantee that these loans would be repaid is future tax revenue of these special districts? So there's really no liability to the county. It's all on the special districts.
Correct.
Beautiful.
Anything else?
Any other questions for Treasurer Mello? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move for approval of item 19.
Second.
That motion second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Ayes appear to have it, do have it, so ordered. Item number 20, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious about the extension of this contract.
Thank you, Chairman Linkfelter. Supervisor Gold, the extension of this contract, generally speaking, our contracts are 1 year plus 4 renewals for a maximum of 5 years. We would have ended the maximum of 5 years in January. We're actively working on a resolicitation process with the jail to get new services in place, but it wasn't something that we could let this contract lapse. So we had actually reached out to the vendor in December to say, can we do a 6-month extension? That should give us enough time to get through that formal solicitation process and either award to a new vendor and allow for transition of services, or if the incumbent is successful, then we'll just start services once this 6-month extension is up.
When you solicit new contracts, are we looking for something similar to what we have now?
My understanding...
In 21, we changed this. This pulled in a whole lot of money. But you would think that the burden would be on the inmate, but in reality, the burden is on the inmate's mother. And I have a problem gouging the inmate's mother for phone calls to her loved one. And I believe the sheriff agreed with me on that, and we looked for a different contract that paid for the costs and whatnot without overly charging the inmate's mother for phone calls.
So when we go through the solicitation process, we score things other than price. And so if the desire of the department, I know we've talked about this before, procurement facilitates the process. We don't necessarily define the scope or what is important to the department. So if that is important to the department, that can be something that we have as scoring criteria in the solicitation process. I think 5 years ago, it was seen as this could be a revenue generating contract to help support the costs of running a jail facility. If the opinion is that we've gone too far on the side of, to your point, charging family members in order to contact inmates, then that's something that the sheriff's office, if they convey that to us, will make sure it's part of the evaluation process, part of the scoring process in determining who the selected vendor is.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, any other discussion? Tara, I think, is it the sheriff that writes that scope of services?
Well, we'll work with the sheriff's office, yes.
So there's obviously room, I think, to Supervisor Gould's point, either in method of approach or beginning with the end in mind. We want this to still be a revenue generating contract, but opening it up to the private sector to say, hey, how do we accomplish that, right? What are some different revenue models and things like that? So I'm sure you guys will take care of it. I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes appear to have it. Do you have it? So ordered. Item number 21, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious, what is a Zoochtel OP800 archive writer, and what does it do?
For this one, I will punt it to Recorder Durst. They've done a lot of research on this.
Okay. Good morning, Recorder Durst.
Morning, Chairman and Board of Supervisors. An archive writer is what we use to store all of our permanent records onto microfilm. We microfilm all permanent records to store them to be within Arizona state standard. So we record documents at face value for land documents and all of that. It goes digitally into our recording database, and then we microfilm it for historic purposes and permanent record. So it's microfilmed onto microfiche.
Little tiny film. So we still do that so that we have a permanent record that's not in a computer file.
Correct.
So
And
if
that,
we have some catastrophic computer failure, we still have the records.
yes, and we have had an archive writer for 20 years. It's now outdated. We put in capital project. This is all from the recorder surcharge fund, not from the general fund to replace it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Okay. Heard that motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes appear to have it, do have it, so ordered. Item number 22, Supervisor Martin.
Yes, I would like to find out more about this boat that cost $569,000. I've had a background in boats in the past, nothing about the emergency operations aspect, but boats in general, and I'm just curious as to what this $569,000 boat entails, and who's paying for it.
It is a lake assault boat.
We're going to assault the lake?
I don't know.
Good morning, Chairman and Supervisor Martin. I don't have all of the specifics on the boat. I can answer a couple of questions. It is a sonar boat. It will be used for emergency operations. We were talking in our office, it's almost like a mini tanker boat because of the purpose. It was a specific grant fund that this board approved. It's not county funds that are going towards this. There was a grant fund that was approved for several boats. We've taken a couple to you. This one is the largest of the boats. I don't know if there's someone here from the sheriff's office, but it is used for daily patrol, but also in emergency response. So it's been specifically equipped for those emergency type responses.
Clerk Scoobel, is someone from the sheriff's office on?
Yes, Sheriff Schuster is on.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Martin. How are you?
Oh, I'm great.
Good. Real quick, I don't want to take up too much time on this item, but I do want to give a little background for our newer board members. Our boating program is one of the busiest boating programs in the nation. Here in Mojave County, we have high use on all our lakes and rivers, and as such, we have been striving for many decades now to run an adequate fleet. The primary funding source for all of our boats and equipment come from two sources. We allocate money, thankfully, through grant funding with Game and Fish and with Arizona State Parks. Back in 2009, the SLIF fund, which is the State Lake Improvement Fund, was actually pulled. It hurt us significantly. That was the fund that replaced all our watercraft, and as you can imagine, these boats go through a lot of daily wear. They are very, very well, there's a lot of hours put on them in a quick amount of time. So we found ourselves retrofitting boats, and that's not the best way to do business. But again, we didn't ask for county funding out of the general fund. So SLIF was returned to us. Supervisor Martin, to your question on this boat, on paper, sure, it looks like an extreme number, but you do need to understand this is not a pleasure boat. This is a heavy-duty commercial boat that is completely outrigged for our use. It's a working dive platform / operational boat that gets used, unfortunately, over and over each and every year. So this is coming through grant funding dollars at no added cost to the taxpayer, and it's competitive. I mean, we price these out. I wasn't thrilled with the name Assault Boat, to be honest with you, but that's the company that offered the best product for the price. So I hope that explains a little bit.
Sheriff Schuster, how big is this boat, and what is the horsepower rating on it?
You know, Supervisor Martin, I don't have that in front of me. I can liken it to our previous command boat. I would say it's probably 32 to 36 foot, and it's probably powered by, well, I know it's powered by outboards, probably 250 to 300. So total of 5 to 600 horsepower would be an estimate.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gould.
I just wanted to correct what I think was an error on the sheriff's part is the SLIF fund was not swept. It was partially swept. I made sure that the previous sheriff got $2.5 million out of every budget, and also that La Paz County Sheriff got an equal population-based amount of money for policing the river while I was state senator, and we were in a budget crisis and trying to keep the state from crashing into the ground. Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion points from the board?
Make a motion that we approve this.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Heard that motion and second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes appear to have it. Do have it so ordered. Item number 24, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious if says this is something that didn't get done in the past on this particular state opioid response.
Good morning, Chairman Lingenfelter, Supervisor Gould. This is an amendment, so the amendment was late. And so it's for fiscal year 24. Although they paid us for the work that was completed, the amendment was behind.
So the board never approved the accepting of the grant?
We did not know. No, the grant itself was approved. This is amendment number 4. We were functioning under the contract, and then amendment number 3. And then amendment number 4 showed up in beginning of the month. And so we're bringing forth amendment number 4, which was for fiscal year 24.
Okie doke. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other discussion? Director Palmer, you said this is for amendment number 4?
Yes.
In the backup, does it say contract amendment number 3? Or am I just...
It says it right here on the, on the agenda, says number 3.
Yeah.
I don't know what it says in the backup.
So is this for 3 or is this for 4?
Oh, I apologize. It's for 3. So we were functioning under amendment 2.
2. Okay, so this is for number 3. I just want to make sure there wasn't a typo there.
No, it was my error.
Okay. I'd be open to a motion.
Motion to approve.
For that motion second, any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes appear to have it. You have it so ordered. Item number 32, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was a request from a member of the public that wanted to speak on the item.
We have one member of the public wishing to speak, Scotty McClure.
Yeah, when this first came out, Scotty from Bullhead. When this first came out a few years ago, I talked to Jeannie Kinch when we were still on a talking basis. She was going to try and take this to the Senate or the House of Rep, whatever, and try and get it to where we could have a protection or a exemption for low-income people. Well, I don't know. Sonny's not here. I don't know if it ever made a committee or whatever happened to it. Otherwise, it never got done to help me out with low income. As far as I'm concerned, 3 years, 4 years later, whatever this is nothing but a scare tactic from fraud protection people. And I don't know where this money goes. How this is going to protect me. $50 sitting in her kitty. Is she going to use it for something else or whatever? I'm not real happy about this. This is another scam. This is another word for tax. Even though it's not a fee. That's how California, and I did vote for Proposition 13. First thing DMV did was come out with fees instead of tax. This is nothing but another change in the definition of tax. It's a scare tactic. The fraud protection companies want to scare the hell out of me. If somebody comes to my door and tells me to get the hell out, they're going to find out I own a double-barrel shotgun.
Assessor Kench, you would come up and explain the program?
Chairman, Board, thank you for having us here today. Not exactly sure. You did task us with explaining what it would take for the county, which, by the way, all these funds do go to the county general fund, what it would take for the county to pay for it. Well, we did send you a lot of information, 3 pages of what we would have to look at. Right now, we have about 1,579 applications that we filled, and we find that it would probably take 1 to 2 additional staff members at about $65,000 a year to pay for even just giving it to the low income. It's huge to come up with those numbers to find out how many low income we have, how many veterans we have, because you did ask us that maybe we can come up with that information. Without knowing the exact numbers, we can't. But we can tell you that if we were to give this free for some of the population, it would be about at least 1 staff member. And if we gave it free to all of the population, we would be inundated with people to sign up for it, and it would be at least 2 staff members. So I would say it would cost our county from a minimum of $65,000 to probably $200,000 in order to give this program. I did go to the state and ask our representatives if is an appetite for it, because the recorder got some money for theirs as well. Because we did it without going to the state first, there was no appetite. So you know how that goes. So if there's any specific questions we can answer for you.
Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Assessor, what's the difference between your program and the assessor's program?
Meaning the recorder's program? Okay.
Yes, the recorder's.
So the recorder's program is a program that is going to notify you if you sign up for it via email. It goes through a process that you sign up, and if it's in your name, they will notify you that something has happened and been recorded under your name. So there's some holes on their program and there's some holes on our program. So between the 2 programs, we've got the safest county in the entire state. In our program, instead of just notifying you if there's activity, we're more proactive when it comes to our office and there is a change of deed. We're going to call you and say, if you're on the program, did you do this, to make sure it's legit. So there's little differences between the 2. Again, if you sign up for both of them, you're completely safe. We're going to call you. We're proactive on the assessor's office, where there's just a database on the recorder's office. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. You can bring Lydia up so she can explain.
So if money was an issue, the people, and they had email, then they could sign up for the recorder's program, where they would be receiving email rather than a phone call.
Yes, Mr. Gould. We found that really some people don't want to be put in that big database in the sky, and our program stays in the assessor's office. So we found that there's a difference there, and some people are happy to do both. Some people just want ours. So it just depends, and we're glad to be able to offer both.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions or discussion from the board? That I guess we don't really need a motion. This is agendized for information only. So
thank you, Chairman.
We'll move to item number 33. Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question on 33, does this only draw federal funds with county reimbursement? Wow. So effectively what this does is it only draws the federal funds when it's an item that is covered under the federal Medicaid program.
Madam Clerk, do we have someone from the Sheriff's Office?
We do. We have Sheriff Schuster still available. Oh, there's another person who's raised their hand as well. Let me see if Robert Volbrat.
Okay, yeah. We'll take Robert.
Good morning, Chairman and Supervisor Gould. This, as I understand it, this applies to anyone who is a resident of the state, and so anytime we send someone to the hospital and they're there for 24 hours, basically the entire cost is covered. I'm sorry, I didn't get to figure out how to how to jump in on your earlier question regarding the cost, and if Access pays the cost of other hospitalizations that are less than 24 hours on item number 15 and 13. But yes, we pay about approximately 10% of the total bill for everyone, whether they're in state or from out of state. So Access does apply to those. But to answer your question regarding this item, we are covered on any charges that are incurred.
From reading the backup, it appeared that it only was covering the charges that were applicable under the federal Medicaid program. So I was curious if it doesn't qualify under the state plan, do the county then have to reimburse the state for the portion that they paid?
I have to be honest with you. I don't know the ins and outs of this agreement as well as I probably should, but I think there are just different rates for different things that they do. We also contract with Correct Care Integrated Services, and every hospital bill that we get is sent to them, and they code it to be sure that we are getting the maximum access benefit.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to go ahead and, if no one else has any questions, motion to approve this, but I'd like to get a better explanation of what's really going on here. And that was more of a what's going on question than do we want to do it or not.
Sure. Could you make sure that the sheriff's office sends the board members the information that was requested? We'd certainly appreciate that. We do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes appear to have it. Do have it so ordered. Item number 34, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious whether the $70,000 that we're receiving on this grant actually covers the cost of doing what it is that we do. Have an employee, have a position to do this work.
Madam Clerk, is the sheriff still with us? Sheriff's office?
Yeah. Sheriff Schuster?
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Gould, I'm going to defer this one to Commander Volbrack as well. This falls under our reentry program, and I think he's more versed in it than I am. Bob?
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, can you just tell me one more time what item number we're on? I stepped away from the
Absolutely.
desk for just a moment.
Yeah, we're on item number 34.
And my question was, is the county required to have this position? And does the $70,000 that we receive cover the cost of the employee?
I believe this does cover the cost of the employee. Yes, I do.
Is there a state statute that requires that we do this work?
That I can't answer.
Chairman, Supervisor, Sheriff Schuster here. I just
Sheriff,
want to make
go
clear, this is a budgeted amount that goes into our reentry program. We would not accept a position and pay a position that was not at least recouping what we believe would be the requirement of the position. It's not state mandated. This is to augment our existing reentry program that has been very successful to date. So I hope that better explains it.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Sheriff, and again, one of the ultimate goals of this program, if I'm not mistaken, is to try to tackle recidivism, and in tackling recidivism, helping the taxpayers, hopefully to Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, that is accurate. The end game is to get people back into society as a productive member. We offer a wide variety of reentry tools. It's a very robust program. We've already seen some tremendous success stories. We've modeled ourselves after Yavapai County, who's running over 30% with their recidivism rate reduction. So, in my opinion, it's an exceptional program. We've got fantastic staff that are designed, perfectly designed to fit the role. They're doing a tremendous job, and I look forward to seeing even further results as the program grows.
Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, are we tracking this program to see whether these inmates have a better outcome than the people that don't participate in the program?
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Gould, absolutely, 100% track rate. Again, the end game is to stop seeing those names come across the jail roster. In fact, what I'll do, I've been to do this, I will send all the board members some of our most recent success stories so you have a little bit better understanding of the process from the beginning to the end stages. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Any other comments from the board? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Heard that motion in second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes appear to have it, do have it, so ordered. Item number 37, Supervisor Gould.
236.
36.
Oh, excuse me. Item number 36, I forgot to circle that. Supervisor Martin.
Yes, I had a question about the $125,000. I personally wasn't aware that the sheriff's office gets money from the Arizona Game and Fish Department. And I'm curious about why that happens and how it's all facilitated.
Sheriff Schuster, do you want to tackle that one if you're still with us, or do you want to delegate that
Certainly.
to the staff? Great.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Martin, we've been relying on Arizona Game and Fish and state parks for many, many years. There is a collected boat fund that used to arise from a percentage of fuel tax that was put into a state fund and then allocated amongst the 15 counties. It has since been revised. It is now a registration fund. So a portion of every dollar of Arizona registered boats goes into that fund, and then they're distributed based on the need. So we have been fortunate, if you want to call it fortunate, that we've always had the highest need because we have such high volume of activity here in Mojave County. But it's an excellent tool for us to fall back on. In this specific incident, we are able to re-outfit some of our boats with new outdrives and get the equipment to keep the fleet in top order and ready to go.
What, do you know how many boats are registered in Mojave County?
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Martin, I'm not sure. I would guess it's more than 2.
It would be more if the state would allow Californians to register their boats in the great state of Arizona.
Yeah, to that point, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Gould, there is a large discrepancy in the way this is collected. I think we are underfunded. The majority of users in the summer months in Lake Havasu and the surrounding area are from out of state, so we're not collecting registration on the actual, or registration value on the actual users that we see. So really the Arizona watercraft fee is supporting all of the program used by all.
Okay.
To the best of my knowledge, an out-of-state resident cannot register their boat in Arizona.
Not legally.
Yeah, and it's part of it was from our war on illegal immigration that got wrapped up inside of there, and no one has ever taken time to fix that. But I think you could get people that their boat stays in Mojave County year-round. You could get them to tag the boat in Arizona, then we receive the benefit instead of California.
Well, one of the reasons for that is because of the taxation rate. In California, recreational watercraft are taxed at a much higher rate than they are here in Arizona. So just like they do when they apply for a fraudulent hunting license or fishing license, they use an Arizona address, register their boat as an Arizona boat, when in fact they're from out of state. I don't know that the law enforcement people do a lot of checking on that, but I do know that it happens, and it happens a lot.
Sure, I would agree.
Entertain a motion?
Make a motion and we approve.
Second.
With that motion second, any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I appear to have it. Do have it so ordered. Item number 37, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A member of the public requested this be pulled off the
Yes,
consent
we
agenda
have.
to testify to it.
Thank you. We have Mr. Walter Spar.
I rise to object to the reappointment of a judge. I have 2 pages. There's not enough time to go through all of these, but these are all the violations of law this man committed. I'm going to skip around because of the shortage of time. I skip down to the second issue. There's no law allowing the judge to accept or enforce somebody else's false, made-up law as the authority to nullify the state legislated law. Opposing counsel filed 224 pages to try and cover up that they were in violation of the law. In this document, there's 71 criminal false statements, violation of 132310 and 2311. The judge knew that. He just passed it by. He didn't want to address it. And you don't have time to go through all these documents. I'm going to have a suggestion at the end here. I'm going to cut this as short as possible. The next one, there is no law allowing a judge to deprive a litigating party of his right to respond to a motion submitted by the opposing party unless the motion was submitted ex parte. Opposing counsel filed a motion. He granted the motion within 2 hours of the time they filed it, nullifying my statutory 5 days opportunity to address this issue. I brought it up to him in the next oral argument. He refused to allow me to address this issue. I'll go to the next page. Skip down to the second one. There is no law allowing a judge to issue an order and only send it to one party and not enter it into the docket. So the opposing party will have no knowledge of the order even existing. He sent out an order. He sent it to the opposing counselors, did not send it to me. When I brought this to his attention, he decided I was lying. I approached the bench and I gave him a copy of the docket. And I said, sir, show me on this docket where this order exists. He couldn't find it, didn't exist. And then he said, he asked the opposing counsel, did they receive it? And he said, yes, they did. Well, how did you receive it? Well, we received it on the attorney's docket. And I said, you have 2 dockets? One for the citizens and one. So I said, this is prejudicial. I want access to the other docket so that this won't happen again. He refused. May I suggest something?
You can carry on.
I would like to take this to Steve Moss, present this to him so that he can review this and just have him withdraw that guy, that name from the request for reappointment. Is that okay with you?
Which name?
You just put his name on table it. Just table his name.
So you're requesting that this be continued so that you can...
Can I approach you so I can understand what you're saying?
Sure. So you're requesting that this item be continued so that you can have an opportunity to speak to Judge Moss, who's the presiding judge, Bobby. Yeah, you're done. You get that, clerk? Anyone else care to speak on item 37.
I'd like to know what he's talking about.
You can call him back up and ask.
Yeah, my understanding was it was Honorable Judge Ken Gregory. So.
Supervisor Martin, did you have any other questions for the speaker?
No, I don't.
On item number 37, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that this item be continued to the next meeting so that Mr. Spar has an opportunity to consult with Judge.
Second.
For that motion, second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes appear to have it, do have it, so ordered. Thank you. Item number 38, Supervisor Martin.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am asking the board to confirm an appointment for Mr. Joe Herrero, who will be taking my place on the Public Lands Commission. I've known Mr. Herrero for a long, long time. He's a very smart man, and he's really excited about being on the commission, and he understands what the job is. And I think he'll do a great job for the people of Mojave County. So I would make the motion that he be approved.
Second.
For that motion, second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Ayes appear to have it, do have it, so ordered. Item number 39, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was another one that a member of the public requested that it pulled. Scott.
Thank you. We do have one member of the public, Scotty McClure. You want to come up to the podium?
Scotty from Bullhead. You're going to have a discussion on February 3rd, so I just want to add a couple things to ask you to do this. It's like when I came up to you, Travis, this morning, and I didn't know how to pull something from the consent agenda because we're not allowed to speak until the end of the meeting. So how can I pull something from the agenda? So I handed him a slip with two numbers on it, and they got pulled. So you need to address that. How are we going to pull more paperwork for her? Now the other one is she going to be here throughout the meeting? If it's 3 o'clock, noon, are we able to sign up then? Because I have a hard time getting here. I don't have a hard time doing the 9:30 and then going home. I can't wait for some because I have a bad case of COPD. I use this throughout the meeting, just sitting there on my butt. So wait until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. I have left meetings before and not addressed things because I'm too tired. So that needs to be addressed. And I wish we could move this back to the start of the meeting. But are we going to be able to sign up? Can I get here at noon and address the last item? And hopefully you haven't pulled it to bring it forward. So I'm asking you to do that. And how do we pull the consent agenda item?
Thank you, sir. Any discussion from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gould.
Those are two, I agree with Mr. McClure. Those are two things. That is generally how you get an item pulled is you contact one of the supervisors. If you want something pulled off the consent agenda, if they want to agree to do it, then they'll move. The other one, the signing up for call to the public, does because I doubt you're going to get people here at 9 o'clock in the morning that wait through the meeting to get an opportunity to speak. So that's something. Make a motion to approve item 39.
Second.
And just to let everybody know, the last time the board took this up, I believe it was 2021 when we have a new board now. So each board makes its own rules. So motion to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? I appear to have it. Do have it so ordered. And with that, we go to the regular agenda. Item number 47, we discussed an executive session. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair, what happened to 40 and 41, 42? Were they pulled?
I don't have them on my list of being pulled.
They were not pulled, so they were approved at the, for the consent agenda.
Any items that were not pulled for consent for additional discussion were approved with the motion to approve the consent agenda. Item number 47, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Gould.
I move that the county attorney proceed with the advice for the, I guess it would be advice that was discussed in executive.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
That motion second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Here to have it, do have it, so ordered. Thank you. Item number 48. Supervisor Letman.
Okay, so I've been approached by several federal and state legislators about if it's appropriate that they could be using spaces available in my particular office to meet with constituents as they come in the area and other local elected officials. I certainly have no problem with it. We have space in my particular office, but I think there should be concept approval around this and some guardrails and guidelines put in place. And I just defined some questions that were important to me before we move forward. If the board so chooses to approve the concept, how's temporary? How's temporary going to be defined? Can the visitors use our telecom systems? Are there any liability issues for the county? Are there other locations that should be used? I would presume there's probably space down in Lake Havasu City also, possibly up here, but I would like to move forward with this, but only if we have some concept approval and guidelines in place.
Manager Elters, you look like you want to say something.
Mr. Chairman and board members, thank you. Supervisor Letman shared this inquiry earlier, and my understanding is the inquiries have come from federal level as well as state level, and it would be great to explore further what that would mean. Can admin assist? Can they use the conference room? Do they have access to our county internet network and so on? Is there any liability to the county in the process? We will be, and I assume just as those individuals expressed interest in District 2, they may have similar interest in other districts. So we will be happy to take this on, spend a few weeks, look at the answers to those points that Supervisor Letman and I just added to it, and then come back to the board with what it means, if there are any implications, even if there are some concern, what can we do to mitigate them so we can provide the access and give you the information you need to say, yes, we will make it available, or no, it's not, it's not a feasibility at this time. So we'll be happy to take that on and bring you information back.
Other comments or discussion from the board?
Chairman, if I could just jump in real quick.
Yeah, Attorney Esler.
Thank you. I apologize. What I would suggest in this concept is to create a simple license agreement. Licenses are a very straightforward mechanism that the law allows for authorized use of certain things. Classic example of a license is when you use a parking garage, when you go in and you go to a sporting event. A license could also be when you use the library. Go in, those are license agreements. Those are licenses where you don't have a property interest, but still you have some, be able to say, hey, we have some control over this, and this is what you can and can't do. Also, licenses agreement are a whole lot easier to use as opposed to leases. When you work with the county, there's a lot more hoops you have to go through to create a lease agreement, but a simple license agreement would probably be able to handle this, and we'd be happy to draft something.
So this was agendized for possible action to direct staff to create a policy. That would be something that would be included in that. Great. Any other discussion from the board?
Chairman.
Supervisor Gould.
I think we also ought to make sure that we uphold the right of the supervisor to run his office as he's. I don't think that it should be that other elected officials. I don't want to create a program where they come to the county manager and ask to use, that's right. If they want to come to me and ask, I think that's actually the way that it's been handled.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I also want to thank Supervisor Letman for bringing this up. It's something that should be addressed. I think it's good for the citizens, for the county to be as vertically aligned and close to the federal and state representatives that we have as possible. That's how you get things done. So appreciate you bringing that forward. I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we direct staff to come up with a policy and procedure for allowing the temporary use of our offices for federal and state legislators and their staffs.
Second.
For that motion, second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? I appear to have it, do have it, so ordered. Item number 49. Oh, excuse me, did I miss one here? Nope. I did. Yeah, Gotti, I'm sorry, I didn't call on you. I believe a policy is going to be brought back, and we'll make sure that you get a chance to talk on that one. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Item number 40, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an item I'd like to have the rule change so that my assistant could travel from my office in Fort Mojave to my office in Lake Havasu twice a week in a motor pool car. She has to drive 210 miles a week, and I think she should at least be paid the same as the other assistant. This seems like the simplest way to do it. We were planning to keep the motor pool car at the sheriff's substation in Mojave Valley, and it would only be used to travel back and forth between that location and my Lake Havasu office.
Thank you for that. I'd open it up to the board for any comments or discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chair.
I'm going to go with Supervisor Martin, then I'll get to you, Supervisor Borelli. Thank you very much. Supervisor Martin.
I just wanted to bring forth this. We have 3 people in the administrative staff upstairs. One drives every day from Bullhead City. One drives every day from White Hills. One drives every day from Dolan Spring. Those folks, those employees, are not compensated for those having to drive. And like I say, I'm just bringing this forward. I know it's going to be the board's decision on this, but this is something that I've learned since Supervisor Gould brought this up. And I understand where he's coming from, for sure. But I'm just wondering, what about those 3 employees? And there may even be more county employees that drive long distances to get here that are not compensated. But I don't know what Supervisor Gould, what arrangement he had with his admin person. So, but I'm just bringing this forward.
Thank you. Supervisor Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The question, I guess, would be for our legal department. Is this still under litigation?
Attorney Esplin?
Sure. So I think there's, first off, Chairman Lingenfelter, members of the board, there has been a request for compensation and there could be potential lawsuit. Nothing's been filed yet, at least to my knowledge. We haven't seen a lawsuit filed yet. But there is discussions out there about a potential claim against Mojave County, and we've recently just wrote a letter. But that is separate and distinct from this item. This item is an item where the supervisor is asking to amend the rules to allow for a change in the policy. So to answer your question, there's a claim that's been, or at least there's been presented a letter requesting a settlement, and but no litigation has started yet.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Attorney Epstein, so if we approve this, doesn't it give the impression that the county was in the wrong and basically admitting guilt with the threats of a claim?
Chairman Lingenfelter, Supervisor Borelli, that's a valid question. I don't think that it does. I think that's the issue in the other case, or excuse me, the issue in the letter that was presented to us was whether the payment of back taxes potentially could come about. Here, if we say, well, we want to change this, I don't think it would be, because we've already taken our position on the tax position, and so here I don't think that would be. I don't view it as an admission of guilt. I don't see it as that.
Question for, I guess, Mr. Chair, another question.
Supervisor Borelli, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this would be for the manager. Does any other employee have use for a vehicle going to and from any of the other supervisors? This would be the only one who would have a vehicle?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Borelli, if I understand your question correctly, the distinction, I'll base my answer on the distinction between temporary and permanent. For we have ongoing arrangement where employees on temporary basis who are assigned by the department head or are required by their job to show up to their regular place of work and then travel for work-related travel. Those are provided either a county vehicle to travel or they use their personal vehicle and they're reimbursed for it. So yes, under those conditions, we have that is a common occurrence. I think your question is, are there any other county employees that get a vehicle to commute to work under a permanent set of conditions? And the answer is no, but with an exception. Those individuals, such as with job assignment that require them to be on call and respond, whether being that have responsibility to respond from the road department or our water system related to any breakdowns after hours and so on. Those are listed in the assignments that have been provided to the board and the board has approved. We do not have any other arrangement outside of that.
Supervisor Borelli, does that answer your question?
Yes, but here's another question. Does, for example, if my assistant needed to go from my office to the county seat, is that my assistant can be reimbursed for mileage?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Borelli, yes, absolutely. That would fall under that temporary assignment. It's not permanent. Whenever your assistant or any assistant from any other office or any county department, to that matter, need to have job-related travel that is as assigned and on irregular or infrequent basis, then yes, that they would be reimbursed for that or provided a county vehicle to travel in.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Martin.
I'm sorry, Mr. Elders. If I understand you right, and like I say, and I'm totally ignorant at the agreement that Supervisor Gould has made with his assistant, but would it then be allowed if he's had an agreement with her or made an agreement with her and she is required to go from his office in Mojave Valley down to Havasu, would that fall under that temporary qualification or not?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Martin, I speak candidly. Please do not, any of you, take what I'm saying as being critical of any board member. With that said, one board member cannot make an agreement on behalf of the board. I think that's what brought us here in the first place. That the agreement that is referenced was we had no evidence, no record of the board approving it. That's what caused us to bring it to the board for discussion before, even during the last board, and it continues to be an issue today, and that is why Supervisor Gould put it on the agenda. So the board, if the board wishes to go in that direction, the board can do so. My concerns have been, and I've shared them with the board before, it's the precedent setting, it's the consistency among all other employees that do commute to work and commute, what would reasonably be considered substantial distance.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 5th district, all the county supervisor districts are unique. We have 2 districts that are nearly fully encompassed by a incorporated city. So their district is inside of a city. They're a neighborhood outside. We have a sprawling district, the 1st district, that encompasses 2/3 of the county. We have the 4th district, which sprawls also. But what makes my district, the 5th district, different is the 5th district, half of the population lives in the Fort Mojave area. The other half of that population lives in the Lake Havasu area. Those 2 areas are 52 miles apart, those 2 offices. Supervisor Lingenfelter's district has about 20% of his population is north of the river. That's a good chunk. But each and every one of these districts is different. These assistants are not merit employees. They are not covered by merit protection. They all have different jobs. My assistant, what I've required my assistants to do was to work 3 days at the Fort Mojave office and 2 days at the Lake Havasu office. That is not for my convenience. That is for the convenience of my constituents. Because with them being so far apart, to talk to their supervisor or to talk to the assistant, they would then have to travel. I would rather have my assistant travel. When I was elected in 2018, this was already in place. Supervisor Moss, who predated me, had an office in Fort Mojave. He had an office in Lake Havasu City. When I was elected in 2018, I looked at that policy and I thought it was a great policy. So I continued that policy. I hired an assistant. That assistant, then I said, let's look at getting you a motor pool car. So we asked the motor pool. They said, we don't have any motor pool cars available for Lake Havasu or for Fort Mojave. We only have motor pool cars in Kingman. Well, that disenfranchises my constituents. They said there was no car available for her. And I said, well, I guess we'll have to pay you mileage then to travel. She then checked with finance, who directed her how to do that. We did that with that assistant for 3 years. When I hired Valerie, I told her that this is how we did it. That was 3 years ago. That was how we did it. I negotiated her salary with the knowledge that she would be reimbursed for mileage. We continued to do that until this last election cycle, when someone made a complaint about that. That's how it got brought up. The county manager and the finance director took a look and found out that that was a taxable benefit under IRS rules, which has nothing to do with county rules, so that would be taxable income. The board voted to pay the county's portion of that tax, but not my assistant's portion. That's what she has a lawyer about. Different subject. So I brought to you. We can't pay her mileage now because the board changed the county rules that said if it's a permanent situation, you can't pay mileage. I came and asked for a pay increase for her at the advice of staff, so that she could then pay that $7,500 in vehicle costs out of her higher salary. The board said no. So I'm here today asking you that if she can use a motor pool car twice a day to do that, she has to drive 105 miles twice a week. I think that's an unfair burden to put on her. No other assistant drives nearly that far. One drives 11 miles. The other two drive 3 miles. My assistant drives to our Fort Mojave office. It's about a 3-mile drive from her home in Fort Mojave. But those other 2 days, she's required to drive to Lake Havasu. I think it's unfair to make her foot that bill of about $7,200 a year. I think she at least deserves the same pay that the other assistants get. My assistant is a full-time employee. I don't want 2 employees because it's better off to have one full-time professional employee that always knows what's going on rather than 2 part-timers. A lot of times those part-timers are always looking for another job. You have a constant flow of people through your office. I don't want that. I want professional people to serve my constituents. This is not for my convenience. This is for the constituents' convenience. And I don't think that my assistant deserves to have a net pay that's $7,200 less than the other assistant. Thank you. Please support.
Thank you. Other discussion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. I would say that I agree that 5 districts of Mojave County, they're very diverse, difficult in a lot of areas to just do some sort of a cookie cutter one size fits all approach to it. My district, District 1, is probably a great candidate for having 2 offices. I've just never done it. I've always just preferred, and it's worked out so far. There's probably about close to 30% of the population there. When you look at all the growth that's happening in Scenic, Beaver Dam, Colorado City, I just haven't gone there yet. I just prefer to go up there myself. But as Supervisor Gould said, I think that this is something that has been there before. I mean, you didn't institute this; you just sort of carried it on. I think the constituents down there might be used to it. So, and I think that it's something that we should probably just correct the problem that we experienced. Sure.
Thank you, Chairman. My budget has always been in the middle of the pack of budget, even running 2 offices. So it's not an additional cost because I cut other things to keep my budget center of. Thanks.
Thank you. So with that, if there any other discussion? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second, and I'll call for the vote. Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Hey.
I appear to have it. Do have it. So ordered.
Thank
you. Item number 50. Authorize the signing of the joint letter of to federal leadership advocating for boundary adjustments to the Baj. I'm just going to call it the Baj National Monument to restore balanced land management and national domestic energy policy and security. So I placed this onto the agenda. Those of you, I know Supervisor Gould is all too familiar with this as we dealt with this 2023, 2024, but in District 1, the Biden administration, with a stroke of a pen, they used the Antiquities Act, and really without any sort of public process in Mojave County. This monument is half within Mojave County. They didn't really have any sort of a public process in Mojave County for our citizens on this Baj monument. They went over to the pro crowd, the crowd that was for it. They had ample public process over in Flagstaff. And to give you this sort of the broader view of this, when President Obama was president, his then Secretary of the Interior, Ken Salazar, did a 20-year moratorium in this very same area. One of the reasons they did that 20-year moratorium was they were being told that there were concerns over uranium contamination in the water supply in the Grand Canyon and all these things. So they didn't have a lot of water data and other data at that time, so they said, okay, we're going to do this 20-year moratorium to give us time to really study the data, collect the data, study the data on this stuff. So during that moratorium period, 4 separate USGS offices did a report, a scientific report on the water quality in this very area. And was uranium mining or uranium having a contamination effect? And are all the horror stories that we hear, from the horrible processes that we saw many, many decades ago on the Navajo reservation, was that still happening? And the report from the water report said, no, that's not happening. There's no water contamination. It's all below allowable limits. But that science was tossed aside. Even though we were successful, Mojave County was successful in lobbying the federal government to exclude some state lands and some private properties that were originally in the boundaries, they went ahead with it. Really without any sort of a process, as I said, or looking at science. So now we have a new president. President Trump actually just yesterday on day one, he issued a national energy emergency. But this really goes to not just national security with our energy, and that's oil, that's uranium, that's nuclear power, small nuclear reactors, all of that. But it's also a concern over federal government overreach. It's the effect on multiple use of our lands, the effects on our ranching and other proper multiple uses. So we're going to be reaching out and working out with Senator Lee from Utah. Unfortunately, Arizona senators aren't too helpful on this, as they actually support this. So we're going to try to work with Senator Lee, and we're going to start to contact some of the other Washington County, Utah, Kane County, and others to work with Senator Lee and the Trump administration to try to get this modified. That would be my description of it. If anybody has any discussion. Supervisor Gould.
Let's not forget that we invited the Biden administration here to Mojave County to make a presentation to our people. They declined that. So they locked up part of our county and didn't even bother to come to our county to explain to us why they were doing it.
That's absolutely right. And Supervisor Borelli, you may remember this. Because of that, we actually had 3 separate committees from the state legislature come to Mojave County in this very auditorium and hold a joint session to oppose this monument. And there's actually a lawsuit, I believe, litigation that's still pending. The state legislature sued over this. Mojave County joined that. Colorado City joined that. The town of Fredonia signed on under that. Do we know where that stands, Attorney Esplin?
If I remember correctly, right now they're in the pretrial litigation stages. I believe the defendants have filed motions to dismiss. We've responded, and now they're just waiting for a court to rule on those.
So we certainly hope that moves forward. But the way that this was enacted, process does matter, and it was laughable that there was really no process here in Mojave County for our citizens. So, and really no weighting of the actual scientific data that we have. It was just all the emotional statements that we keep hearing. So with that, I would make a motion that we approve.
Second.
Supervisor Borelli, did you have any comments?
Yes, I will be actually. Thank you for those comments. And you're right. We did have some hearings on this. As a matter of fact, I'm meeting Congressman Gosar this afternoon as soon as this meeting is over with to discuss these types of issues.
That's excellent. We're going to need. I just want to give him a shout out. Congressman Paul Gosar has been against this from day one. He's always been supportive of this. I forget the name of his counterpart just north of us, but she is wholly supportive of this. So I think together, all of us, we're going to put together a pretty good coalition to get this changed. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Martin.
Yes, I've spent a lot of time on the Arizona Strip up there, even though it's not in my district, and made a lot of contacts with the ranching families and people that utilize that. And it's remarkable how many Mojave County residents from south of the river recreate on that north side. And I think we all know why it was brought forward by the Biden administration. It was political, pure and simple. I mean, there wasn't any data that would sure lead one to believe that this was needed like they tried to portray it. So I think what's been done in the past by the Biden administration as far as these designations, completely outrageous, way overreach, and hopefully President Trump will get this thing back in line. But I know from my aspect and from the people I've talked to, I can't find anybody that can support this the way that it went down. So I will absolutely support what we're trying to do here and make the wrong right for the people of Mojave County.
Thank you for that. Supervisor Letman.
I would actually, if you don't mind, like to read 3 short paragraphs from your letter to Senator Lee, which encapsulates why I think this is the right thing to do and why this 180 degree on land management planning by the Biden administration was so baffling. This is what you wrote in your letter. Under traditional multiple-use management of public lands, each area of land has a different emphasis on management. Some lands, like the Grand Canyon National Park, undeniably deserve protection and a focus on recreation. We get that. Those lands were carefully set aside decades ago by Congress for that very purpose. Other public lands are better suited for other uses, including livestock grazing and mining fuel to protect the environment, such as uranium for national defense and clean energy power production. And then this third paragraph is great. Certainly, some of the neighboring Native American lands within the new monument deserve deference, tribal priorities. Congress, under the direction of the late great Morris Udall and John McCain, deliberated and passed the 1984 Arizona Wilderness Act with Utah's support. In doing so, it gave clear land management direction to federal land management. That says it all.
Thank you for that. I make a motion in a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Ayes appear to have it, do have it, so ordered. Thank you. Thank you for that. Item number 51, discussion and possible action regarding Mojave County Emergency Management Report on fire breaks and vegetation management for wildland fire protection. I put this on the agenda, obviously, with the horrible, horrific fires that we've seen. I'm sure many of you have also received inquiries from constituents, and just thought I would put it on the agenda and have emergency management brief us all on where we stand, what we're doing, what we need to do, so that we're all prepared and informed. Thanks for being here today, Joe.
Thank you for having me. I do want to apologize. I did actually spoke a couple weeks ago, and I know we did have new board members. My name's Joe Dorner. I'm Director of Risk and Emergency Management, and I failed to do that a couple weeks ago, just assuming that most of you knew me. I'll let you know what my intent is today. As Chairman Leonfelter stated, he had actually reached out to me and asked me some questions about this, and then he had asked to put on the board agenda today. And my intent today is to be able to present just a summary overview of where we're at in this county and the things that we do from a mitigation standpoint for wildland and wildland plans. And then I'd like to reach out to each district and certainly meet with you personally, me and my staff. I do have somebody on my staff who's somewhat of a subject matter expert on this area. Unfortunately, the rest of my staff is tied up with DEMA today on another risk. I don't want to say it's a risk planning is what it's on, and so they're tied up today. We'll move forward. The first thing I just wanted to let you know is Mojave County Emergency Management, and all hazard emergency management, and that means that we're dealing with any and all types of hazards, inclusive of that is also wildland fires. We have 3.5 personnel. I'm the half. I share that position over there. I share my position with Risk, which keeps me a little bit busy. We have two technicians. One of those positions is vacant right now. We're recruiting for that, and we'll have an emergency manager as well that answers directly. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get into got about 10 slides, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on any of them. The Community Wildland Protection Plan is actually in your packet. It's also online on our site that you can go in and you can take a look at any time. I'm going to try to hit some key points, and once again, don't get too concerned about if you've got like little things that you're not catching or whatever. We'll get with you and we'll make sure you got a good understanding on everything. In 2007, there was a core group of collaborators established, including federal, state, municipal fire and fire districts, to come up with a community wildland protection plan. That was one of the intentions of it was to have compliance with the Healthy Forest and Restoration Act of 2003. The plan was complete in 2008. The plan that was in your packet and also that's on our site is the 2019 renewal of that. We're going to be due for another renewal on that, either at the end of this upcoming fiscal year, or at the beginning of the other. Depends on where those funds might be. They're not cheap to do those plans, even renewals on them. Okay, in that 2019 analysis, we came up with those. There were some overarching goals that came on that, and that was to improve fire prevention, suppression, reduce some of the hazardous fuels on both public and private, restore the forest, rangeland, and riparian health. Riparian health is Riverside. It's something on riverbank, and that's where you're seeing that. Those are key and important for us for habitat and also for control of floods as well. You notice I sent an email out the other day letting you know that they over in those wastelands they were doing some burning over this past week, and that's some of those activities that are occurring. Okay, also to promote community involvement and provide community protection. Those are key in for us from the standpoint that we do have to have some community involvement with that, because we start talking about privately owned land. Recommend measures to reduce structural ignitability in the wildland-urban interface. And that's a key point. I'm going to show you a map in just a little bit so you have a general understanding of what that wildland-urban interface is. And then encourage economic development in the community associated with vegetative treatment. That one can be a little bit difficult to understand, but just to give you an explanation of it, it means that so that when we are having development, we've got development that's also associated with growth out there and responsible growth, such as fire protection, water systems, and things like that. Okay, promote and develop wildland emergency evacuations and communications plans, and I'll give you an example of how we've been able to do some of that up in the Wallapai Mountains, and then integrate the plan with the surrounding community and agency management plan. You notice I said that there was a core group, and it's key and important to understand that in this arena, because we have lots and lots of different land that is out there. Much of this county, there's over 13,000 square miles in this county. Much of it's federal land. Okay, there's federal land, there's private land, there's state land that are associated here. We're dealing with many different organizations when we start talking those. This area right here, and I know that it's not huge, and hopefully you've got a decent shot of it on your screen here. I will just let you know, this is some of that ownership that goes out there, and you will see, you've got state land scattered in various areas throughout here, in and around the local communities. A lot of that's privately owned land, but you have a tremendous amount of federal lands as well. And then I didn't mention even national park is associated with that, because that whole Grand Canyon area is national park. So it's not BLM that we're dealing with on that national park. So other entities that we are dealing with. Up in the upper portion of that, I'm going to point out a couple areas if you look at the strip up there. And so the strip, even though our dealings up there are with BLM. It's not BLM Colorado River District, BLM that's up located out of Utah. And so you see many players associated and involved with it. This area right here, and the purpose of this slide for me is just the shades that are out there. You can look over to the right. There's 20 different types of fuels that may exist here. And I'll try to simplify this. The types of fuels that we find in this county are typically associated with the elevation. So if you go down and you've got 500 down in the Bullhead area and a lot of the river down there, we're down around 500. In Lake Havasu, we're at 700. You get up into Golden Valley and we're around 2,000. You get into Kingman, we're 3,000. The Walpi Mountains, we're getting up in there 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. Up on the Strip, we're 5,000. Peach Springs, 5,000. And so that's why you see the differences in the fuels, not only the types, but the density of them as well. And so that has significant impact on how we associate risk and truly the risk that's associated with those various types of vegetation. You go to Lake Havasu City, you don't see too many wildland incidents or even hear about them. Think about that. You just don't. And it's because of the vegetation and the scarcity of it. Do we have them in some of these other areas? Yeah, we do. And I'm going to point out a couple of those on this slide right here. If you take a look at this slide, and what I want you to do, and my arrow's not popping up here, but are you guys seeing my arrow or no? No? Okay. So if you do turn around and take a look, and you see these different dots along the way, what are they following? They're following roads. They're following Interstate 40, 93, 68. And this slide is showing you where we have multiple starts. And so when you see that yellow there, it's 2 to 5 ignitions per 1,000 acres. And so we see lots of starts along roadways. But if you go over and you look into like the Mojave Valley area, we got a chunk of them down there as well. And we can actually have some down there that are +5. In 1,000 acres. And so those are areas. Why is that? Because they have their marshland, they have those areas and reeds that are right around there. A lot of those back right up, right over into Mojave Valley Fire District there. It covers that entire area. We do have some with Mojave Valley. They do some burns, they do some promoting down there. And that's one thing that we work with them as well to turn around and promote, try to thin some of that stuff when they can. They had a project, I believe, last year. It might have been 2 years ago, but they had a project to thin some of that vegetative growth out there from that standpoint. So those are some of the things that we do. Most of the roadside fires, they're started by anything from sparks to cigarettes to whatever they may be. That's a tough one to do a whole lot on. I will tell you that ADOT tries to keep their roadways clean, as do in the county right of ways as well. Try to keep that brush back, so because we know that there's going to be potential starts out there in those areas. But we do see those from that standpoint. One other thing that I'd like to point out to you, and it's on all these previous slides, it's a little easier to see on this slide right here, is the little heavy marking around. That's because the county doesn't stop right there, but that's what we would call the urban wildland interface. And that's where we see this, we've got there's 18 wilderness areas in Mojave County, but we start seeing it encroaching upon. Is there any development, or is there just some houses? Do we got a few houses here and there? That's really that line out there that starts encroaching on where people live versus just being out in the middle of nowhere. And that's where that key term of its urban wildland interface, because that's where we get real concerned when we start meeting that. Some of those areas, just to even get to them, there may or may not even be roads. And so there's fires that we do have that sometimes they let them burn and see if they can burn out. And that's also a method sometimes of trying to reduce some of these things. Getting into that community wildland protection efforts out here, I want to throw some things over onto you because this is where it is. From 2008, we've been out there having annual opportunities for funding, federal funding to be ascertained by fire districts. We take this, we include it into county fire officers. We also make them aware of that because they have to provide for those. And as they go through these grant processes, they're able to get some of that money. Okay, 2013, this was a big one that the board did, and that gave us the ability to have fire bans within Mojave County during high fire risk conditions. It's not always associated with fireworks. You know, does it sometimes come to the fireworks and we're getting a little close there? Yeah. Part of the reason why is because we've given that entire spring the opportunity to build up to the summer. It's hot, continual, and now we've got an added threat as well. But we've had we've incorporated that ban as early as May before, so it gives us the ability to go in and say, hey, listen, no commercial or no non-commercial fireworks, nothing that's been approved, and then no open fires. Please, kind of keep that in the back of your mind and expect for some things like that as well. The emergency management has conducted multiple fire mitigation projects in the Wallapai Mountains. One of the reasons why, because that's a big high-risk area. It's a big high-risk area, and we have homes. We have a county park that's situated right in the middle of a forest, and on the outside of that, 75% of the Wallapai Mountains are BLM land. But we got that. We've got 2 communities that sit in there, and we have, in addition to that, we've got a county park. Those projects, just real quick, those projects can range from having a contractor come in and thin out to my emergency manager is a sawyer, which means he can cut down trees. And we've gone and he's done a few projects that we've gotten inmates from the prison. We have an IGA with them, also from the jail as well. So we'll take them out and they'll assist in some of those projects out there. Put this in here as 10,000 trees have, in that time frame have been removed, and that seems like a lot of trees because you go out there and there's still trees everywhere. And then we're just talking down in the park and Pinyon Pine areas. And most of those were where the park butts up against or comes up against the back of especially Pine Lake community up there. Since that time, just in the last couple of years, another 1,500. And I don't know if I'm going to have that photograph on there because it looks like I'm doing I have a previous presentation. But I would show you that you look at the forest and it looks dense. But you look on the ground, and there's 15 just stumps in a 30-foot area where it's been taken out. And it's not always the 100-foot trees. It may be the tree that's 30 feet, but they're on top of each other and the density from that standpoint. Also, in collaboration with State Forestry, BLM, Fire District, you've had controlled burns that go through Wallapai Mountain communities and various other areas. I will tell you that the fire that I advised you about, the control burns that occurred last week, neither one of those I was aware of until the day before they were going to do it, because you have that, because just coordination. And so, and I spoke with my emergency manager. I go, we need to figure out how they let us know. We're made aware of it, and especially in this environment, we want to make you aware. But do keep in mind, you have these multiple entities out here that's their property, and they're burning on it. So, continuing on, we have an IGA with BLM to provide wildland protective services in the park. Each year for the last couple of years, you have approved that. The board has approved that. I believe last year we went ahead and we did a 5-year plan. Also associated with that, and I make mention of another area here because I talk about one of the things that we've done is improved and maintained evacuation routes up in there, and Public Works is also part of that agreement as well. Public Works goes up and they'll actually blade some areas to make sure that stays good and fit and to be able to get out. And so that was a nice little addition that we put in last year that was brought to the board as well. Pine Lake Fire District and EMS, we have an IGA with them. Keep in mind that park is not within a fire jurisdiction. They're not within, it's not within a jurisdiction. At that point, the majority of the county is not within a fire district or jurisdiction. So if you weren't aware of that, please be aware, and as we meet with you individually, we can explain that a little bit more. And so it's, if you go over into California, I think that anything that's not within a municipality is covered by a county-wide departments or statewide. So it's a little bit different in Arizona. And so when you're talking the fifth largest county in the United States, that's significant. I'm going to move on. Evacuation routes, as I mentioned, Director Latowski was gracious enough to get us hooked up with evacuation routes that are at least maintained a little bit better, and we have good security on those. Also, there's been a couple sirens that have been mounted up into the park area so that they can be activated and park in the Pine Lake area. And that was one of those goals that we had talked about. I do want to point out during the flag fire, we lost a third of the park to fire. Okay, if those mitigations activity wouldn't occurred, in discussion with people associated with that, I think we'd have lost probably 3/4 of it. But there were places where they were able to tie off because we try to stay on top of those and at least do what we can. I had already mentioned the more recent mitigation project that was out there. Recently, the Pine Lake Properties Owner Association now recognized fire-wise safety programs. So that's a big step for us, because that means that we have people in that area now that are making sure they have clearances. They understand that if they can keep things away from there, and that's a big, huge part when you're dealing with the public. And the last thing that I want to throw over to you from that standpoint is that right now, the state has a $3.7 million grant, and those dollars that has been awarded to the state Department of Fire and Forestry. We're involved with those things. We're hooking them up. Those are going to be instituted in the park, Pine Lake, Pinyon Pines area. There's a reason why, because of this plan that we went back and did. We had to do research on it, and it showed various hazards out there, and it was deemed the most highly threatened area in the state, and that's why they got $3.7 million. And so right now, that's in the planning process. That's being spearheaded by State Department of Forestry and Fire. We're at the table on that. We're pushing those things, pulling in those local responders in the communities, so that hopefully we get the most bang for our buck out of those. In addition to that, we get over into like the little bit of the training areas that we go through. In 2018, we formed a working fire group that gets reported on every month at the county fire officers. They coordinate, so if they have needs out there, they do annual full-scale exercises. In addition to that, you see the Walpi Mountain Wildland Fire Response Review, and to be quite frank with you, that's been being done for 30 years. Whole time I was in the fire service, we were involved with those. All county EM staff and their OXCOM, which is auxiliary communications, members are trained in wildland fire emergency responses. Now, they're not going to be out there fighting fire, most of them, but they are trained at a level that allows them to be out there in that. I want to throw this on here real quick. Some just additional risk concerns that we have out there are limited fire protection, or water supply and fire service protection capabilities in the interface in rural areas of the county. As I had mentioned, not all areas are covered by fire districts, which means if you have people that have homes that are out in those areas, they probably don't have any primary fire. Hopefully they'll get some response from someone. The state fire does respond. They don't have the responsibility. They call it the authority to respond to those areas, and then also local fire departments, a lot of times will respond out there, but are not obligated to it. The one thing that they don't have is they don't necessarily have water supply, and some of the necessary things have any long-term operations out there. That might be a thought that you always have when you're looking at a new community, So, where's it going? What's the infrastructure there? Is that infrastructure designed not just so that we can get water out of it, for our domestic use, but also if it does have to be utilized? And so I'll throw that out there to you. Same thing, local code enforcement falls along the same lines, remove vegetation on private lands. A lot of times, if they are in a fire districts sometimes have the option to be able to do that. If they have an adopted code, then they can enforce a code, but once again, that's up to those fire departments. Future growth and human impacts, it's changing every day. You see it every meeting, and you see it change, and it goes on. If you look at population increases, from the 90s at 25,000 people to now we have 240,000 people, and not all of them are down in Bullhead City, Lake Havasu City, and Kingman. It gets spread out, and a lot of those are in the county. And then I also, in the attachment that I sent, I put extended drought conditions within the county. Do keep in mind that there's a couple things that I just like to point out. One of those is we've had very, very little moisture, and the good and the bad. When we get lots of moisture, so if we have a real wet spring in those higher areas where we see those light fuels in the desert areas, we can see a lot of vegetation that comes up. And so that water there, we kind of go like, yeah, we don't want a bunch of it coming up, but what it does. It does add some moisture to the fuels, and in the higher areas, what we really want up in those higher areas, which include the Wallapai Mountains, the Strip area, we want snow. We want pack, and to go from there. And we're not in control over that right now. In addition to that, we saw record temperatures for weeks on end. This past year, and we just haven't gotten any there. So we just, we're not going to have control over it, but we need to be aware of it and know that it's going to happen. And we did. This picture is here. If you look, and this is up in the Wallapai Mountains, but you'll notice that you've got they're burning piles up there where they've taken some things down. If you look down on the ground area, just in that small space, look how many little stumps you can see where they've taken trees out. And so when you say thinning, it still looks like there's lots and lots of trees, but that's how a lot of them go away real quick. You got any questions for me today?
Great presentation. I'd open it up to the board. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Martin.
Yes, a couple things. I know in the past I've worked a little bit with some fire issues, and I think most of the fire managers now will agree that Smokey Bear was wrong. The way that it used to be looked at with put out every forest fire, that was a wrong thing to do. Then you ended up with those dog hair thickets and the overload of fuels, and when they take off, they don't just burn a little bit, they're catastrophic stand clearing fires. And I think fire managers nowadays are seeing that, and some of the policies have changed over the years. One of the things that I've seen in my life is when government agencies go in there to do controlled burns, they look at stuff and say, oh, let's do 500 acres. They don't need to be doing 500 acres. They need to be clearing out and doing burns on 5,000 acres if you want to preserve these forests. Because what they're doing now is like putting a Band-Aid over a gushing wound. Because, those forests are just sitting there. Mother Nature is a cruel lady when it comes to forest fires. And she don't take no prisoners. When you look up in the Wallapais, what has happened up there, and what Joe was talking about, if they hadn't have done mitigation efforts, they'd have lost a whole lot more than what they did. But even now, the county, we lost Camp Levy. That's a Boy Scout camp in the Wallapais. It was a great place. For years in the Kingman area, the Boy Scouts went up there. That's where they had there. That thing is not being used now because of a fire. And we have to make sure that we protect those areas from wildland fire like that. And I know Mojave County, they're working with these other agencies, and they have to. Now, one thing I want to know, Joe, we see over in California, the fires, a lot of the insurance companies said, no, they canceled their insurance. Do we have that situation like up in the Wallapais or in Mojave County, where insurance companies, because of the fire situation, will not issue people insurance policies for fire?
Supervisor Martin, at this point, I've heard some grumblings about that. I did have one person that had told me that they wanted to try to get insurance up there as they had purchased something and they were unable to do it. I haven't been able to validate that at this point. So I'd be a little bit remiss and tell you that's actually completely true. I would think that if that was an absolute, that we'd have some knowledge about it.
When one of the things I saw in your slide when you mentioned about the stumps, a lot of forest managers or a lot of fire managers look at pre-settlement conditions, and a lot of people don't know what pre-settlement conditions are. And basically what that is they want to take the forest, make them healthy. And in the old days, when the documents, they used to talk about being able to look up and see the sky. Go to Coconino National Forest, walk through the forest, and try to look at the sky. You don't see it. It's because there's so much undergrowth in there, so much of these dog hair thickets, and when that catches fire, it just explodes. And I've seen it up on the Strip. I was up there when they were doing fire methods up there, and it's in Mojave County. And when I was on the Strip, I never saw anybody from Mojave County there. It was BLM primarily, because if you look at your map, that's BLM country. But I'll tell you what, fire applied right is very beneficial. But to wait and let these fuel loads build up to the point where Mother Nature comes in and says, it's time, and we're going to burn it all off. And I know the greenies, they're saying, don't cut those old growth trees, don't cut those trees. But you know what? Mother Nature takes them, she don't care. So what you're doing for the county and your emergency management with fire, I think is vitally important to the continued safety of our people in Mojave County. And people don't think about it and say, oh, there's no fire. Oh, yes, there is. Go in Travis's district. Look up there. Look at all those fire scars and understand that without proper management, they get just horrible fires that just stand replacement fires in the forest, but also in the grasslands too. So continue to work. Great presentation. You bring to light a lot of things that I think the public has no clue of. They look and say, why do we have a fire guy? Because we have fire here and it's dangerous. So good job. Keep it up. Thank you.
I would tell you in this arena, I'm second string. When we have the opportunity to speak with you, Mike Browning, he's really our go-to guy on that. And it's not my first day on the job in this area, but he's really vested in it and has some good things. Just as one little point, I will tell you a few fires that we had in the Kingman area where I was actually out on them, actually down in Mojave Valley as well. Sometimes it's pays some dividends. People don't necessarily understand, but you see these fires that get big, and it's because they go back and they burn it, which is a defensive tactic to stop a fire before it comes up hard against something, and that takes some of those. And then, for at least a few years, you've got a little bit of a scar out there, and you don't have heavy vegetation. And those are things that some of the firefighters are actually recognizing out there.
Sure.
And to say they paid dividends on the VOC fire, the Element fire out in Vaught Canyon this year. I'm out there with guys that have been in the fire service for 35 years, and that have lived in there for 50 years and said they don't ever remember a fire being out in that area. Right. Well, if you can get away with no lost structures and no lost life, and then sometimes it's not bad. Right. And I wouldn't say that we will ever promote that, because obviously our priorities are always still going to be life safety first, property, sure, and then we go from there and figure it out. I apologize. I took longer than I thought.
No, you're fine.
Oh, great.
Most people don't think about it, but this board, we signed up to think about it. That's why it's on our agenda today. So, Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines, I heard testimony from the state forester about 20 years ago, and he said that we have 200 times the trees that we had pre-settlement.
Yep.
200 times the trees because of the burn and regrowth cycle that was naturally occurring. We suppress the fires. Then when you do have fires, you have bad fires. But 200 times as many trees. I thought it was an interesting fact. Thank you, sir.
Supervisor Lettman, any comments? Supervisor Borelli, any comments?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Joe, just one question for you. I like to focus on things that are within this Board of Supervisors' circle of control. Obviously, we don't have any control over the agencies that we have to work with that manage most of the lands in Mojave County, right? BLM, federal agencies, state agencies. What can we do to strengthen coordination between those? The fact that we just heard, and I don't know if it's just a one-off instance where you barely heard about the controlled burns that were happening in the county before they occurred, or if that's something that regularly occurs. But what can we do to strengthen those coordination efforts between the federal and state agencies?
I think that's really just a reach out. Might have been an oversight from that standpoint. I did ask Mike Browning about that, and he says, yeah, typically we would hear about those things. So we'll be doing follow up on that. I had mentioned to you just a little bit in a brief conversation I had with you as well. We don't have a real good line of communication with BLM out of Utah. And we've got these two little spaces up there, and so we're going to look at figure out how we get direct contact with them, or if it goes through the Colorado River District, so we know if they're doing burns, and so we're in their loop. It's reach out. It's reach out. Same thing that we would do, with a lot of times we would hear stuff like that's going out of there. We would hear it through Colorado City Fire District, and they recently had a change within the last year in chiefs, and so we're still establishing that. We've reached out. We talked with their new chief on that to let them know that we can kind of get a little bit separated up there from you, and especially when you're getting resources out of Utah. And I think it's just finding out where those links are and they are not. And just making sure they're solidified.
I've got good contacts with the Arizona Strip office of the BLM up in St. George. If you guys don't, I'd like to work with you guys to make sure that we get that strengthened.
Absolutely, because as I had told you, I said we just don't really have a good link with them out there on that, and those are areas, because you get into some of those same vegetation issues that we're talking about in the forest and stuff like that because of their
Yeah, just two real quick questions. As we continue to see in some of these very, very rural areas that are butting up against vegetation areas, is there anything that you think that we need to look at as far as a prevention standpoint, that maybe working with development services, if there's going to be a certain number of build out of population in an area that's not within a fire district, that we need to be including something in our codes, or just with the eye of prevention, right? If you think about something in advance and you require that something's built in a certain way, maybe down the road if something bad happens, you're going to minimize damages and nobody will die.
Yeah, I think that there are some things I prefer to get back with you on that, because those are recent conversations that we've had in my office about how we might engage, because if you approve, and I make sure I understand what you're asking. So if you're looking at a subdivision, or you're looking at approving something going into an area, how are we having assurances that there's going to be some level of at least fire protection, or do we have that concern? Was that correct? Is what you're asking me? Yeah, I'm not going to have an exact answer for you, no. But maybe an issue where we have a little bit of the seat at the table to say, hey, listen, we can have those conversations, and whether that's directly through or working with developmental services, or if that's something that we have. Perhaps that's something that the county manager's office and development services and yourself can maybe lend an eye to. And then if there's anything that's a good idea that's recommended, I'd recommend bringing it to the board. And the only other thing is, if you would, on that 3.7 million grant, if you'd keep the board appraised on that's an exciting. Exciting it is. We're excited about it. It's not we want it to get going and speed up. And so because we want to see some dividends off that. But 3.7, that's a good chunk of change to be able to do some work.
It's not bad. Any other discussion from the board? Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Item number 52, Supervisor Letman.
Okay, so when I was running for election to the seat, one of the concepts I kept referring to regarding budget planning in the county budget was this red pin, green pin concept. We're going to have a budget planning meeting on April 16th, and I gather that's going to primarily be a red pin process where we're looking to take items or reduce items out of the budget. What I want to talk about today in an introductory mode today is a real green pen opportunity perhaps. And as I looked around my district, I think one of the biggest opportunities that we may or may not have, okay, is the operation of the Laughlin Bullhead International Airport and the Mojave County Airport Authority. And very importantly, the lands that are adjacent to the airport. What I'm looking for over the long term is seeing if there's any opportunity for extracting value out of this. And I think key to that is understanding what the arrangement between MCAA and the county exactly is. And hopefully we will get a seat at the table in the operation of the MCAA, because it is absolutely critical that we have a successful airport operation at that facility, because it is a key component of economic development in that part of the county. In fact, for the county at large, south of the Grand Canyon, that is a major airport opportunity to us. And it's important that that board and the city of Bullhead City and Mojave County work together to make it a successful operation. Full transparency, I did meet on Friday with the chairman of the MCAA board and the airport director, along with two representatives of Bullhead City, to kind of talk this out a little bit and assure them that the purpose of this discussion item today is not to bash the MCAA board or the airport director. I kind of like what I see coming out of them in terms of their strategy, the efforts they're making. But I think critical to this is understanding exactly what this arrangement is. So I've asked our CFO and later on our assessor to kind of give us a background. What exactly is the arrangement and the lease agreements between Mojave County and the MCAA?
Good morning.
Good morning. Is it still morning? Good morning, Chairman Lingenfelter, board members, Supervisor Letman. Thank you. I'll just say this was, the leases with MCAA predate my tenure with the county by quite some number of years. So this is an opportunity for some education on my part as well. And thank you to Attorney Esplin for providing all of the lease documentation. He's kind of I think the county's de facto expert on this whole arrangement, as much as we have one. So just to start, just a brief timeline. The original master lease that Mojave County signed with MCAA was in 1991, and that encompassed all of the property, not just the airport and the air terminal, but also the property where today Sam's Club and Home Depot and a number of other restaurants sit. That lease was first amended in 1997 when Don Laughlin donated some additional property. It was those additional properties were taken up and incorporated into that master lease agreement. In 2003, it was amended again. That amendment changed the lease term and extended it to an expiration date of December 1st of 2028. And then in 2005, this is really the significant event in the life of this lease. The lease was split, and so a second lease was created. The original master lease, now they removed all the property out of that was used for the airport and the air terminal operations. Those properties became part of a new lease. The existing master lease now only encompassed what they called those revenue generating properties. And just a quick list of some of the subleases that exist under that original master lease. It's Home Depot and Sam's Club are really the two big anchor stores, and then there's a number of restaurants: Carl's Jr., Taco Bell, Panda Express, Chili's, McDonald's, IHOP, and those are all those restaurant establishments that really abut Highway 95 down there. And so, again, a new lease was created specifically for the airport and the air terminal properties. That had an option to renew for an additional 25 years at the time. And then in 2009, this was the last time, it was the fourth amendment for the original master lease, and it was the first amendment for the airport and air terminal lease. And those amendments essentially extended the lease term, the current lease expiration date, to March of 2049. And then there's a option to extend or renew that lease for an additional 40 years, taking it all the way out to 2089. This slide just has kind of the current state of both of those leases. As I said, both leases are set to expire March of 2049. The option to renew those leases for another 40 years in the contract language is at the sole option of the lessee. So if MCA wants to renew it for another 40 years, they have that option, and the rent is $1 for that additional 40 years. That is the language of the lease, and that really is where we're at today as far as the airport, the MCA operations. Supervisor Lettman mentioned he met with some folks from MCAA. They have a 7-member board currently. They have a number of subcommittees that meet regularly. That would be in the General Aviation Subcommittee, the Real Estate Subcommittee, and a Finance Committee. And with that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions or punt them to our attorney.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gould.
So, Director Mornian, Home Depot pays $1?
Supervisor Gould, no, the MCAA, so the way the leases, both leases are set up, MCAA has a lease for all of the property, 2 leases with the county, and then MCAA has the authority to sublet. And so they have subleases with each of these different businesses for the property that those businesses sit on. And so those businesses pay rent to MCAA. The $1 was that was all the money that the county was ever going to see from these leases.
So MCAA pays the county $1.
They paid the county $1. It's not $1 a year. It was $1 for the entire initial first term of the lease, and it will be another $1 if they choose to renew for an additional 40 years.
I guess that's better than Home Depot paying $1, but I'm not sure on that for a while. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Sure. Any other discussion?
Well, so to recap, we're getting 4 cents a year, okay, for this land that we have leased to them, if I understand this correctly. Part of our lease agreement, I believe, we have the right to see their financials, correct? We should note that this is a not-for-profit agency, correct? That's the way it's constructed, legally set up?
So, Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Ledman, there's a statute that specifically authorizes the creation of a nonprofit entity to operate the airport, yes.
Okay, so the nonprofit agency then, in terms of transparency, we can certainly go on to the MCAA site today and see the agenda for their meetings, but in terms of transparency, I haven't been able to find copies of the minutes, for instance. Now, and of course, Attorney Esselman, they're not subject to open meeting laws, correct?
That's up for debate. You have to determine whether it's a public entity or not, and it may or may not be. It's one of those quasi ones because it's operated for the benefit of the public, and so I'd have to double check to see if they are subject to the open meeting laws. The same is also with public records. there's just certain entities that kind of fall in that gray area, whether they're whether they're subject to open meeting laws or subject to the public records request. I'd have to look at it.
Same would apply then to their financial records. So I know that you've requested financial records. In meeting with them, they obviously are going through a forensic audit right now based upon some issues they've had with financial reporting and a fraud investigation that's in the works right now. They can come talk to us about that perhaps at a later date. But I think part of also that what's so important to understand is the value of this land that the MCA is leasing from us. So I assume the assessor is going to come up shortly to talk to us about what property tax, if any, we collect, okay, from the airport and the lands leased by the airport. She can explain that, I'm sure. But understanding that the land being owned by a not-for-profit, a nonprofit agency means we're not probably collecting sales tax on the property tax on that land, and importantly, they retain the title to it instead of it being sold to an appropriate developer, okay, and going on the property tax rolls, the value of the land, not just the improvements. In talking to some of the folks that I think have a reasonable understanding of commercial land values in Bullhead City, I've heard repeatedly stated that these undeveloped lands that MCA is sitting on right now, and we're getting 4 cents a year for, is some of the most valuable commercial developable land in Bullhead City, bar none, number one, okay? And that at some point in time, we need to work with that board and possibly take a look at these lease agreements and see what we can do down the road to work with them to bring some of that value back to the taxpayers of the county who deserve a better deal than this, okay? So that's my point until Assessor Kinch comes up.
I'm having horrible flashbacks because this is not the first time I've dealt with an airport authority like this.
Well, that's right, Kingman.
Oh, yeah. Who wrote the leases?
I think that's a question for
Attorney Esman. Sorry, I should have directed it.
So just by way of background, I don't know if it was the county or the authority. It's hard to determine who did it, but the original one was May 21st of 1979. That was the lease agreement with Laughlin, because originally it was the Mojave County Airport Authority, which included Kingman. And then they broke off in the 80s. 1988 is when they broke off.
Right.
The one that we're talking about, the two we're talking about, 1991, this was between Mojave County and the Mojave County Airport Authority when it was only with Bullhead City.
I just asked who wrote them.
I'm sorry?
Who wrote the leases?
It's hard to tell.
It sounds like the airport authority wrote the leases.
Could be. I don't know.
And airport authorities are in fact subject to open meeting law.
They usually are. I mean,
They are.
I mean, it's yeah, I'd have to double check though.
They also have a board. Do you know if is it an open board or is it a closed board?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question.
The problem that we had with a former airport authority is that they instituted a closed board, and that I won't go into it, but it made it so anybody that was interested in throwing their hat in the ring and participating on the board didn't even have a shot if they didn't want you.
I think they're prepared to discuss that when they come see us in March.
I've got a number of different questions. Like I said, this isn't the first time I've dealt with this issue, a similar issue. We do have one person to speak. Mr. McClure, do you want to come up to the podium, and then we'll continue with the assessor?
Scotty from Bullhead. Well, Toby Carter's going to be mad at you for thinking that you guys are going to take away some of their sales tax. How in the heck are they going to spend their money when they don't get it? You're going to have a fight with them. This is not the Kingman, has nothing to do with that airport. This was owned by Don Laughlin, and who you should have been asked some questions since Don Laughlin and his wife are now deceased, is maybe talk to Matt, invite him here. Don and him, I think, were pretty close, and I know Don told him a lot of the stories on his journeys in his helicopters and his land flying over it, and inviting Matt. And if it's not Matt, then Matt will tell you who knows more about this going back to the 70s and the 60s when they started this. He owned it. Matt can probably do as much as anybody else here can, probably more. Talk to him. I want to know how many meetings you've attended over the period of years you've lived here at the airport. You can get up there and say your 3 minutes, and that's all you get too. Just like here. See, I've got 1 minute and 38 seconds left. But I've attended more meetings than you have there. And this fraudulent thing, oh, good grief. That's like having 15 bank accounts floating around doing nothing.
Assessor Kane, you want to come to the podium? Thank you.
Good afternoon again, Chairman, Board. We left you a little packet, had a map in there, explains what we own as Mojave County. And we also, in that packet, you'll see a list of the parcels that Mojave County owns and leases out, and the full cash value. That's not the taxable value, that's the full cash value, which we must, whether it's exempt or not, we have to get that value. So that gives you the full cash value of all of those parcels. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth column over. And I know that Supervisor Letman was looking for the value of those parcels, and so I'm hoping we gave you that information so you can move forward on this. And I'm here to answer any questions I might have.
Supervisor Letman.
How much property tax are we collecting on the land that is?
Zero. It's exempt because Mojave County owns it.
How much property tax are we collecting on improvements?
That we have on your list. So it's an IPR, and an IPR means that we don't own underneath it. We own, you have owners on top that need to be taxed. Businesses and so forth, personal property, and we also have those numbers on there also, the full cash value of what, that's not the taxable value, again, that's the full cash value. The amount of taxes I don't have on this list, but I just have the values. But you do have taxes coming in for Home Depot. It's for what's on top of the land. We are no taxes at all for the dirt. But all the businesses are treated just like every other business personal property.
Okay, so we get property tax on the improvements, just not on the land, and
Correct.
we never will get a cent. So it's been this way since at least 1991. I would suggest, broadly speaking, that's a form of corporate welfare. It just happens to be that this corporation is a nonprofit corporation, so it's not going to shareholders and management and all that stuff like that. So we're effectively subsidizing the airport through the loss of our property tax revenue on the vacant land. Would that be safe to conclude?
I guess it would be safe to conclude because we're not getting any taxes whatsoever on that land. We're getting that 4 cents that you came up with, right? And they're making the rent for the land.
Yeah.
So we aren't getting no taxes at all for that dirt.
This is conjecture on my part, just a thought. I'd be willing to bet if we talk to Sam's Club and say, hey, instead of paying an annual lease for the next 40 years to the airport authority on this land, we'd like to sell you that land in your building. I bet you they would write us a check.
Yeah, but you have
a significant amount of money, and there would probably be at least 6 zeros behind that first number. Just, that's conjecture on my part. I'm not a real estate agent, actually your wife is. But I just don't think this is a good arrangement, folks. And I hope where we're heading here, at least we're getting an understanding of what this agreement is. I think there's opportunity there to extract value out of the land. I understand the lease is in effect. I understand the payments from these tenants to the airport authority is in effect. I get all of that. There's plenty of vacant land there, and we already know it's some of the most valuable developable land in in Bullhead City. And we need to take steps to bring the airport authority in, let them do a presentation, okay, on how this works. I'd like to know about governance. Somebody just raised it. How do you get on this board? Who are the board members? What do they do? Who elects them? Okay, so, and again, I'm not suggesting they're doing anything wrong. They're not. They're running an airport, and that's important. But I need this to be a successful airport because it's a driver of economic activity for this county and this city. And that's real critical when we start talking about getting the green pen out. And there's value to extract out of the land. But we're going to have to work with this airport authority to make that happen. Mr. McClure, in terms of your recommendation of Matt Laughlin, I agree with that. It's a good idea.
Thank you. Attorney Esplin, the County of Mojave is one party to that lease, or the two leases, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So we would be in a position, is there a clause within those lease agreements, I haven't seen them, to required or request discussions or things like this? I mean, I heard inviting them to a board meeting to do a presentation. I mean, is that something that as one party to the lease that this board could request?
Certainly. I mean, anybody can ask, any two parties to an agreement, they can ask, both parties can mutually amend it. It's certainly possible.
I'd like to reiterate, we do have the right to request their financials, correct?
Yes, so just looking at, this is term 9, accounts leasee. So leasee would be the airport authority, agrees that leaseor, that'd be Mojave County, may during reasonable times and hours inspect the airport authority's books and records. Authority also further agrees to furnish Mojave, upon Mojave's request within a reasonable period of time, annual operating statements and detailed balance sheets certified by a certified public accountant of the state of Arizona at Mojave County's expense. So that's in both of the leases.
And I believe our CFO's already made the request for those financials.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Assessor, is the rate on these buildings the same rate that you would apply to a similar commercial building someplace else in the county?
Yes.
So it's on the value of the building and whatnot?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's all done as like everything else. Like
we
the other
have a
Home Depot.
similar, the state has been after this kind of stuff for a while. The state university system, they do the same deal. They compete with the free market by letting people build buildings on university land and not pay taxes on it. The city of Phoenix does the same thing. I think they call it the acronym is GIPLET.
This is an IPR here. GIPLETs are not at airports. But yes, and there was a lawsuit in Phoenix a year or so ago. And in that lawsuit, the ASU won. So they're able to continue leasing out the property and making money off of it instead of the county.
Yeah, and that dodges, they don't participate in the same thing that the private owner would participate in.
Exactly.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Chairman.
If I could jump in just to piggyback on
Yes,
that.
ma'am.
So GIPLET is government property lease excise tax, and that applies throughout all of Arizona, but there has to be an improvement. So you're leasing an improvement. So take, for example, let's say that the county owned the historic train station, and they wanted to lease it out to vendors. So they would lease it out to vendors. They own the building, the improvement, but they lease it to the vendors. The vendors would then have to pay the GIPLET, the government lease property excess tax. So that's where the GIPLET comes into play. And by law, all of those GIPLET agreements have to be put on the Arizona Department of Revenue websites, and then you have to put it on the city and county websites. To my knowledge, the county does not have any GIPLETs, and I don't think any current cities in Mojave County have them. They're mostly in Maricopa County, Phoenix, Tucson, and Pima counties. So
I believe the legislature put some limits on them once upon a time.
I think so too. I just don't know.
I'm not even sure that you can even still do any new ones.
It's quite possible. I don't know the specifics of the GIPLETs. I just know kind of the historical part of it.
Thank you, sir.
Supervisor Latman, is there any other additional discussion that's required on item number 52, or do you want to move to item 53?
No, it's just a good segue into the next item, which is formally inviting the MCAA board chair and his airport director to come talk to us about the operation of the airport, what their long-term plans. And the reason, by the way, that's important, I just picked up this copy of the Economic Development Journal, and there's the headline article. Laughlin Bullhead Airport seeks additional funding for major terminal expansion. That might be easier if they had some partners from the city and the county helping them out in all of that. So in speaking to them on Friday, they indicated because of this forensic audit going on, that those numbers won't be available for at least another month, okay, for them to complete that, and that they would prefer to come see us originally in April. I said, could you move it into March, please? And I think we're looking at the last meeting in March. I don't know if that requires a motion or not.
Might as well, that's fine.
Sure, then I move that we approve item 53 as stated, inviting them to come see us in the month of March, the MCAA board.
For that motion and second, any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes appear to have it, do have it, so ordered. Thank you. Item number 54, Manager Elters.
Mr. Chairman and board members, thank you. Late last year, in 2024, the Board of Supervisors directed staff to work on transferring the medical examiner services in-house. And staff has been working with the current provider to do so. Staff reported to the board in December of last year, with the understanding that we would be reporting in the second board meeting of the month. This presentation, and we do have a presentation for the board today. This presentation is truly intended to provide some history to the incoming board members and provide a framework of key decision points as to how we go forward. That framework consists of really three key components: assets, which would be needed, such as transport vehicles, cooling systems, tables, etc. The other would be personnel, which would include two subcategories. First one is investigators, technician, and admin support, and the second being a forensic pathologist. Third and last would be establishing a morgue site. So the goal is to transfer these medical examiner services in-house, and please keep in mind, all three components that I just described to you with asset, personnel, and the morgue site are all interrelated. And execution of the plan to transfer them is truly predicated on us providing you all the information you need to make an informed decision. But it's the timeline of such decision as to how we move forward. So with that said, the presentation has a few slides to it. Multiple departments worked on it, including public health, public works related to the buildings and sites that the board tasked staff with investigating, financial services as well, and procurement. So I'm going to turn it over to a team of department heads to walk the board through it, and then I welcome all your questions. The understanding is we'll report today. We'll take any questions that we don't have answers for, any additional tasks. We'll continue to work on them. We'll continue to come back and report to you to reach a point where you make decisions and then we execute them. So thank you.
Thank you, Manager.
Good afternoon, Chairman and
Palmer.
Board of Supervisor members. So first, as Manager Elters stated, we'll go through a brief history. So I thought some visuals might be helpful as we discuss this, and for those who were not a part of the board during this time. This was the Kingman location for the medical examiner, and this is back in 2001 through 2006. Then in 2006, it moved to Lake Havasu City, and this is where it was for a large portion of the medical examiner being contracted out. Dr. Jervis chose the site on Aviator Drive, and then this is the location that they were at until September of 2024, when Mr. Hassett moved the facility to Mojave Valley, largely due to the lease of the building. The cost increased. So our current contract in 2021, Serenity Group, owned by John Hassett, was awarded a 3-year contract to provide medical examiner services for Mojave County. The contract included an option to renew for up to 2 years while the county developed an in-house solution. In 2024, the board elected to solicit for a new provider. However, the board then moved forward to continue the current contract on a month-to-month basis while exploring in-house options. Mojave County staff are now working with Mr. Hassett on a transition plan to bring medical examiner services in-house. As we presented in the fall, this is the Kingman Regional Medical Center location that we were asked to explore, and this is the facility that and the pricing that the CEO provided to Mojave County. Highlights of the proposed center, Kingman Regional Medical Center location: $2.5 million for build-out costs. Equipment costs would be $500,000 for the non-movable equipment, and the lease options, option 1 would be a 20-year lease at $18 per square foot, with Mojave County responsible for all expenses, including the full build-out. Option 2 would be a 20-year lease at $30 per square foot, with Mojave County responsible for all expenses, and KHI contributing $1 million towards the build-out. And then that brings us to our county-owned buildings, so I will turn it over to Director Latowski.
Thank you, Director Palmer, Chairman Lingenfelter, members of the board. There are 2 non-operating county-owned buildings that are available for consideration for siting a permanent morgue facility with renovations, of course. First of which is on Vanderslice Road, the former Mojave Valley Sheriff Substation. It is an 8,000 square foot facility with one significant physical constraint. That physical constraint being that the ceiling height of that building is approximately 8 feet throughout, and there's 2 considerations for any renovation for a functioning morgue facility. One being establishing a sally port area with roll-up doors, and our typical morgue transport vehicle, like a Ford Transit Connect, is almost 8 feet on its own. So that limitation of 8 feet for both roll-up doors as well as a morgue operating room. Current standards for designing morgue surgery type facilities where you can accommodate adequate lighting and HVAC systems kind of calls for 10 feet ceiling heights. That is a physical constraint. There is a rezone necessary. We're estimating the renovation at about $3 million, but that would be exclusive of any demo if we wanted to raise the ceiling and be able to accommodate those functions, or better accommodate those functions, not that they couldn't be accommodated. Our second site is, I call this a non-operating building, but our traffic control division of Public Works does use it for some traffic control storage. This is on Horizon Boulevard in Kingman, 4,800 square feet. It is already city zone for a morgue, and here we have a facility with an adequate ceiling height. In fact, it has 2 roll-up doors already at 10 feet. And it is currently on city sewer as well, so that, and staff estimates a renovation cost at about $2.5 million to renovate for a morgue operation. At this time, I'll turn it to the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Mr. Latowski. Can we take questions really quick? I just have a couple of questions from the board here, Mr. Latowski. Supervisor Gould?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Latosky, the Mojave Valley former substation, I'm assuming that's on a septic tank?
Actually, Mr. Chairman Lingenfelter, Supervisor Gould, I believe we have a connection to the Fort Mojave sewer utility.
Interesting.
However, there is a lift station involved on site, and one thing that makes staff a little uncertain in terms of a morgue operation with a different type of waste component is whether or not that lift station would be adequate for the waste.
Okay. The Sallyport low ceiling height could probably be overcome pretty easily on that building, but the operating room,
Yes.
you would essentially end up demoing part of the, you're going to be rebuilding the whole building to get that ceiling height up to 10 foot.
That's correct, yes.
I kind of think
Or
that,
work within the 8 feet parameter.
yeah, the traffic control storage building is probably a better choice, I would think, just from those, as much as I would like to have it in my district, I think it's a better choice over by the motor pool. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Director Mornion?
Thank you, Director Latowski, Chairman Lingenfelter, board members. So this, if we could get the slides up on the screen again. Thank you. This is just a summary of the 4 different facilities options. So on the top, you have the 2 different options with KRMC. On the bottom, the 2 county-owned building options. I wanted to put it together just so that you can kind of see it all in one place. We basically have a year 1 cost in that second column, and then year 2 through 20 in the third column. You can see that both of the KRMC options are quite a bit more expensive than a county-owned option. The traffic storage building does seem to be the most affordable option. That being said, it's still a pretty significant cost. I'm going to move on to just estimated budget for morgue operations, and these are the recurring costs only. In order to transition from the current provider, there is about $400,000 or so in equipment that's available, and that includes the vehicles that are currently being used by Serenity. But you can see here, all told, it's about $1.25 million. That's shown in the top piece. We do have some revenues just from cremation fees, but the net of it is about $1.25 million. On the bottom half, what we have not included in that top estimated budget is the actual cost of an ME, whether that is a county employee or whether it is contracted. That estimate of $350,000 to $500,000 is based on some recent ME costs that other counties have incurred, either to contract with a pathologist or to bring them on as a county employee. We expected it would be closer to the higher end of that range if Mojave County were to do so. And then the locum services, regardless of whether we have a contracted pathologist or a county employed pathologist, they're going to take vacations. They're not going to be available all the time, and depending on the workload, we may even, when they're available, we may even need to utilize locum services. And so that's the estimate there of $50,000 to $100,000 a year.
Supervisor Letman?
What is locum services?
So this is essentially another pathologist that would either come in on site, or we would contract out via an IGA to get those services, the pathology
Actually, a secondary
services.
Backup.
Yes, exactly.
If the
Chairman
primary
Lingenfelter.
goes on vacation or something, or they're not available.
That's correct, Chairman. And I'll turn it over to our procurement director for the last bit of this.
Oh, Supervisor Letman, do you have another question?
I have a question on the budget. One of the reasons I like the Mojave Valley location is because as the population of the county continues to gravitate towards the river, it would seem to me if that's where most of the people live, that's where most of the deaths are going to occur. And that part of the budgeting process would be the cost of bringing the bodies up to Kingman as opposed to a more centralized location. And I've never quite understood what the appeal of Kingman is in terms of this specific service, because again, it would seem to me you would want a morgue central to where most deaths are going to occur, and that actually is Mojave Valley or Fort Mojave. It's certainly more central to Lake Havasu City and areas south and east.
Don't forget that Mojave County goes up to Washington, Utah. When you're talking about Central.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Supervisor Letman, was there a question in there? Or?
I just think when you're doing the budget analysis, you might want to take into effect the cost of actually operating the vehicles to a more central location. That would seem to me to offer savings to you, as opposed to bringing everyone up to Kingman.
Thank you. It's certainly a consideration, Supervisor.
All right, let's continue.
Where are we at on this? I'm going the wrong direction. Okay, so I don't think I introduced myself to some of you either. I'm Tara Acton, Director of the Procurement Department. And basically what we're looking at right now, sort of the framework of a transition plan, which is entirely predicated on the board's approval and directing us to move forward, would be that within the next approximate 6 months from the time that the board gives us the direction to move forward, we'd be looking at transitioning assets and staff from the medical examiner operations contracted service provision to Mojave County. That would entail us working with anyone who might be interested in coming over to the county, recruiting, et cetera, and then modifying the existing contract for the buyout of any assets that we can purchase from Mr. Hassett. Then within 12 months of the approval from the board to move forward, we would like to think that we'd have site development. So once a site has been identified and we can move forward with design, construction, or if it were the KRMC location, they could move forward with construction. We would expect that in about a 12-month period, we'd be ready to move into an actual county-owned morgue facility. Then we would also be looking at recruiting a pathologist. Again, the goal would be to hire within 12 months of the board giving us that go-ahead. And then the immediate is, if the board approves this, we'd like to amend the existing contract to phase services from the contracted service provider and reduce the cost. So essentially, we would reduce the scope of services once staff and assets come over based on what comes over to us. And by reducing the scope of services for Mr. Hassett's administration of the contract, then we would reduce the monthly cost that would go to him, and that would help support our costs of running the process internally. And then eventually the goal would be we would amend to transition out of the contracted services and be able to take it entirely in-house. And then, of course, the other portion of this transition plan is the overall budget financing, which is why our chief financial officer shared sort of his estimate of what the total cost will be, total recurring costs and one-time costs.
Thank you, Tara. We've got a couple of people that I signed up to speak. I'm going to get through them, and then we'll go back into our discussion. So the first being Dr. Daniel Sadalski. Excuse me if I mispronounce that, sir. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Lingenfelter.
Would you state your name and your address for the record, please?
My name is Dr. Daniel Sadalowski. I represent Monolith Diagnostics and Forensics. We are the only board-certified pathology group practicing in Mojave County. We're a privately held group, and we provide services to 4 hospitals now in the county. We have been coming to these meetings now for 18 months, I believe, and the reason that we're doing so is because we have been offering a solution to this issue that is well within the sphere of this board to resolve. We have brought a model that is rapidly implementable, cost-effective, transparent, and will provide the citizens of this county the state standard of service that every other citizen in the state of Arizona enjoys. I believe that the transition plan and the build-out plan are dramatically overcomplicated based on what my experience as a medical examiner for 15 years is. We have a functioning morgue that could be brought into service at minimal cost at KRMC while any other facility is built. Unless we're going to be playing basketball, you don't need 5,000 square feet. If one is providing this service at the appropriate level, the bodies don't stay in the morgue more than 2 or 3 days. We don't need storage for 50 bodies unless there's some catastrophic event, and we have contingency plans for that. So what we have proposed 2 years ago to the county was a model of subcontracting with us. Our group has, between the three of us, 20 years of experience as forensic pathologists. We live here. We're here now. We're willing to do the work of the medical examiner at 2/3 the cost of what the county is estimating this will cost. We're not forensic pathologists, but we're experienced in forensic pathology, and the vast majority of these cases that we deal with in this county are not criminal investigations. They are deaths, unattended deaths, and the families needs answers quickly. We are willing to work with the county, and we could get this up and running in 3 months at a substantial savings. Any questions?
If we have questions, we can bring you back up after you're done.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
John Hassett.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Supervisors. Welcome, Supervisor Lettman and Supervisor Martin and Borelli. I just wanted to say that the staff and I worked through the holiday. They were great, very responsive and very beneficial meetings that we had in order to provide the information. And I think it was a very successful meeting and a planning for the succession towards the county taking everything over. I know that there's a lot of money, dollar amounts being thrown around, but I do believe that between my organization and the county, we're able to save quite a significant amount of money going forward in order to plan for the county to take over. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, back into discussion on this item. Comments from the board on the presentation? Would you like to have anybody else come to the podium to answer questions? Supervisor Borelli, did you have any questions?
No. No.
Thank you. Manager Alters, are you looking for just a green light on the transition plan that you offered, or what are you looking for exactly?
Mr. Chairman, board members, yes, did we provide you enough information to make an informed decision as a board and direct staff? Our task is clear, but there are a lot of pieces that have to fall in place. The transition plan, as far as 6 months for staff and asset, is truly predicated on when the board says run and we execute. We anticipate as many people from the current provider coming over to the county, but as you know, we can't really force them to transfer employments. We believe we've laid the job descriptions and the pay ranges and so on, and we think some will transfer, but we don't know how many, so we will have to find out how many do make that transfer and then how many other positions we would have to recruit for. And then based on when we start and how many come over, it would enable us to determine how much we, over that period of up to 6 months, how much we deduct, because we're going to be transferring them and paying them from the county versus the current provider, Mr. Hassett, paying them. And so we'll determine what that number will be. As far as the morgue, we need to design and procure whatever improvements are needed. So we need from you a decision. Is the Kingman facility the one chosen? Is it the Mojave Valley? We can't really proceed on that front until the board makes a decision. We think a year is a reasonable time frame to to do whatever design is necessary and then procure for the improvements to have in place. The dates we're sharing with you are truly perhaps conservative, but we want to make sure we don't tell you a year if we think it's going to take longer. And then the forensic pathologist, if we're bringing these services in-house, does that include the forensic pathologist? If the board wants us to hire, if the board wants the forensic pathologist to be a county employee, then we need that nod or that direction so we can proceed to make those arrangements as well. What I've heard from various board members in the past is at the heart of the decision to transfer the services in-house is accountability and responsibility to the board and so on. So that really makes up the three legs, the three component. If you need more information on any one of those, we're happy to go back to provide it specifically as we can, but in all honesty, as you can imagine, putting specific numbers to it does not start until we start to execute. One thing for sure, though, is whether it's the 6 months for staff and asset or the year for the morgue and forensic pathologist recruitment, we will continue to report to the board on a monthly basis and bring you up to speed as to how we're coming along. At the core of the board decision in the direction we need is where we go from here and how do we fund it? There is the initial investment, and then there is the annual cost. The initial investment, as you saw in the numbers, depending on which site the board selects, will determine the amount needed upfront. But then there's the annual cost, and we will refine that number as we come to you. We anticipate that number to be higher than the $1.1 million that is costing the county at the present time. And I'm happy to answer questions or come back to you at the next board meeting. We are determined to carry on the board decision and directives. But we know it's a complex operation, and we must provide you adequate, detailed information to help you make that decision.
Thank you. Supervisor Lettman?
Yes, I'm new to this, and I can say that I'm not comfortable giving you direction on any of those three items at the moment. Okay, I understand the need of what we want to do, and I support the general movement towards that, but I would like some more time at this. I'd like to crunch the numbers. This is expensive. And at the top of my head, all I'm thinking about here is how are we going to pay for this? And that's an appropriate discussion to have. I'd like to go down to the old sheriff's substation. I'd like to go over to KMRC and poke around. Do you mind if we defer this for one meeting?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Lettman, of course, we don't. And in all honesty, as the incumbent board members know, when the board gave us the direction, we asked and the board granted us about 90 days to come back and report. This is like the second month in the 3 months. So we at least owe the board one more report. But we're happy. We understand that it's going to take time, and whether it takes a month extra or 2, we want to make sure you make a decision on a plan that we can execute in the most cost-efficient way we can. You're welcome to go visit KRMC. That's what we did. I put a team together, reached out to the CEO, and toured it. Today, there is no functioning morgue at the KRMC. We met with them. We told them what our board tasked us with, and what we received from them is the information we presented to you. You're more than welcome to take a look at the Mojave Valley and the facility on Horizon, which is currently the traffic control facility storage area, and any other site that you'd like to. The current incumbent, Mr. John Hassett and Dr. Mosley, understand that we're operating on a month-to-month basis. At some point, I think they need, and we owe it to them to tell them what the plan is, and if it consists of 6 months, 9 months, a year, so they know under what conditions we're carrying on this month-to-month arrangement. But if you need, I understand that the board may need more time, and we're more than willing not only to wait, but to go with you, accompany you, and follow through on anything that you need us to look into.
Yeah. Supervisor Lettman.
Just to reinforce that budget anxiety I'm having about that, this is a big item in the upcoming budget that we're going to take a look at. We have a budget workshop on April 16th, when I assume we're going to get our first look-see at revenue projections. I think that's a critical component to understanding how you want to move forward.
Absolutely. This is a very expensive mandated service that the county has to provide. We have to provide it. The reason I think that we're here, sort of a Reader's Digest version, this is the first time really I think that 3 of our supervisors have taken a deep dive, like Supervisor Gould and I have for a while. So I'd like to give them more time to digest everything, to talk to people if they need to talk to people, explore facilities. That's appropriate. I think that we don't want to force anybody to do a decision today, but I think the reason that we're here, Mojave County has always had a really difficult time with this contract that we've had through procurement, where it's this whole enchilada, where whoever the provider is, not only are they on the hook to provide the forensic pathology services, but they're also on the hook to provide the facility, all the equipment, the staff, everything. And in my experience, what I've heard is that a lot of the practitioners, the pathologists, they don't want to do that. They just want to do the job. And so that's why we're looking at, if we provide a facility, would we have better access to additional providers? If we brought the staff component in-house, would we have access to additional people that might want to do the actual pathology? That's where my understanding is that by dividing this, providing a facility, providing the staff, that maybe we would have additional success in getting a contracted pathologist on board that wouldn't have to worry about all the other stuff that they've had to. And we've seen the morgue bounce around all over the place. So it would provide certainty in place also. It wouldn't change. I currently lean towards the traffic facility. I mean, if that's the lowest choice right now. But I think I'd like a little more time as well to look through all the options that we've looked at. I mean, this is a serious expense. And I think that's fair. But I think that this is something that we have to tackle, and the county for a long time has just sort of kicked this down the line. A morgue project has been in our capital improvement plan for a long time, for years and years and years, probably since I can remember. So, but again, like you say, it sort of battles with substations and things like that too that we're trying to construct. So, any other discussion, Supervisor Martin?
Yes, just interest of transparency here. I met with the good doctor here and his colleagues out at KRMC. I actually got to go through the facility and through a meeting with them, and they explained to me what they were offering versus what we were kind of proposing. And I think if I heard correctly, it sounds like, at least in the big picture, the county is looking like they want to take it over. They want to be doing this. But I did get to hear him and his colleagues, and I went through the facility. But it's the pleasure of the board what they want to do. And like I say, this is $1 million deal. And just to shoot from the hip and say, I think if rest of the board feels like more time is needed, I'm with you on it.
Great. Well, if that's the pleasure of the board, then we won't take any action, if that's okay. Sam?
Chairman Lingenfelter?
Yes.
May I offer a suggestion? I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but I'm just going to throw it out there. What about putting together a work session study trip where where the supervisors meet? We'll make sure we notice this appropriately, where you can go and tour the facilities with staff and listen to what they need to, present to you as you go through these different sites. And hopefully that will make it so that everyone hears the same information at the same time. And then, you can go from there. We come up with, a date or two, to show if that's amenable to you.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion. I think as a part of the time, if the manager's office would reach out to the supervisors and see if they're interested in doing that and planning those dates, we could certainly do that. It's not mandatory, obviously, but
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You probably have to open that meeting up to the public. So you can have quite an entourage, because otherwise we won't be able to discuss anything amongst ourselves.
That's right.
So see whether that is going to work out or whether we go individually might be better.
Right. Well,
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say we'll accommodate any, I will reach out to the supervisors and discuss perhaps wishes, desires, find some common ground and move forward accordingly, whether it be in a special board meeting or just accompanying you as needed to investigate these sites. And not to tip the scale one way or the other, just to point out an item that was in the presentation that was not covered on the Mojave Valley site. It's not zoned today for a morgue, so we would have to go through a rezone process. That's the only point that I wanted to add to that discussion.
Great. So we'll follow up this conversation then next month. Item number 55, looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gould.
I move that the attorney's office take the direction given to it during executive session.
For that motion, do I have a second? I have a second. Motion second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes appear to have it. Do have it so ordered. We are going to the call of the public now. Walter Spar. Mr. Walter Spar. Oh, it's fine. Thank you, sir.
I'm addressing the proposed grand jury ordinance that I have given to you with the supporting Supreme Court decisions. The people currently have access to civil matters, but not criminal matters. Many years ago, the people did have access to criminal law matters by having direct access to the grand jury. At that time, the county attorney invited citizens to come forward and present evidence of criminal activities that they were aware of. The county attorney also held instruction classes to help citizens properly present their own cases to the court. I took one of those classes. At that time, this county was a great constitutional county with a true republic form of government. We lost that when our current county attorney took the helm and eliminated our access to the grand jury. I am asking that you go back to that era, adopting the ordinance that I have presented that will return the citizens' access to the grand jury. A few years ago, there were a lot of controversy about rigged and stolen elections. One of our county judges reviewed this matter and held that there was nothing improper about the elections. This Arizona Supreme Court document in the overhead projection that I am showing you now addresses the incompetence of that judge. He has been censured 3 times for making false statements of a criminal nature to cover up for his failure to comply with the constitutional and statutory 60-day reporting rule. In his defense, he stated that, quote, "I just have a difficult time getting my head around the relationship between the facts in the case and the statutory language. This demonstrates a strong indication this person should not be on the bench and may be senile. I personally sat in his courtroom and listened to him make false and misleading statements while giving instructions to the petit jury in a criminal case. From a practical view, he cannot be removed from his elected position. The only way to deal with this incredible problem is for people to have access to the grand jury to investigate and indict, if necessary, people in his to force them to retire. Please put this matter on your next agenda for discussion and a vote to adopt the proposed ordinance and bring this country back to a great county, and thereby support President Trump's effort to make this a whole country great again. He cannot do this without the help of counties like you.
Thank you, sir.
Please read all those Supreme Court decisions that I gave you.
Appreciate it. Scotty McClure? James Jones, you're on deck.
Scotty from Bullhead, and I support Walt here. I want a civil grand jury and a grand jury access, not just from Ryan's boss. He won't let us go there. Well, I'm mad at you. I'm not going to put this up here, but this is the opinion of the Mojave Valley Daily News on January 10th. Our view is the county supervisors should put public comment first. They printed it in all 3 papers, so they're on our side. That's going to be for another day, I suppose, when it gets back here. Now, get your pens out. I have Senate Bill 1036 at Kavanaugh from Fountain Hills, Senator Kavanaugh. Arizona Senator wants to empower citizens to question government spending to influence voting. And I'm telling you what, Bullhead City is so guilty of this, and so is Gilbert. They just ran afoul of this law. I can't do this retroactive, go after my money that they owe me. But this 416, and you were a member of it and you supported it, and I'm coming after their butts over this. And this, if you read this, 8 pages that he's introducing this bill, 1036, Senate Bill, SB 1036. He's probably already put it on there. If not, he'll be doing it at a later date, as senators can put add on anytime they feel like it. If she had a break or a bathroom break or a lunch break, you need somebody to come down and give her a break, that you sign up. You didn't think of that, did you? Judge Moss and these extra courtrooms you want. How about having night court in the same courtrooms that are already built so we don't have to have a 10-year penny tax? Night court. You want to go to night court, you show a check stub that you were working that day or that week, whatever. If the wife has to go to court, then she takes her husband's check stub to him, and she can go to night court because she's a babysitter during the day. But this would save a lot of money. You already have, the only expense you incur is the guards. You'd have to hire the people where you go through that metal detector. But night court solves your problem. Zero-based budget. I don't know if I want to make Valerie mad at me or not, but how about it start with your 5 offices instead of the sheriff's department, which is a little bit bigger. Start with your little old offices zero-based.
Thank you. James Jones.
Good afternoon to our new improved Board of Supervisors. Last meeting, I made a hasty presentation about the flag because I had an eye problem. I couldn't see. I can see a little bit better today, but I want to bring it up again. And what I would like to do is ask the board, every one of you, especially Supervisor Lingenfelter, if one of you would bring up the subject matter in an agenda and we can discuss what the flag is all about. I gave you most of the information last meeting of the jurisdiction of the flag. I've argued jurisdiction in court and got arrested, so that's how important it is. Just shut up and go away kind of thing. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to present and have a discussion and bring this up so we can have the American flag reestablished in our Board of Supervisors. Can we do that today? Can we have one of you to volunteer to put it on the agenda?
We can't go back and forth during public comment. We're not allowed to do that. But after the meeting, you can chat with individual members if you'd like to.
Okay. I didn't understand the way. I thought you could under the.
Our job is just to listen during call to the public.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you then.
Thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.